They suffered stab wounds in the attack and are now being looked after in hospital.
We need to make sure that when people carry out these activities, they feel the full force of the law. People think they can get away with this. The person who firebombed a few weeks ago is out on bail. That's not full force of the law.
This crisis, it's a crisis for all of us. It's not enough to simply say we stand with Jewish communities. Of course we do, but we must show it and act it. And the responsibility lies with each and every one of us, because it is our fight too.
Let's stop importing people from countries where anti-Semitism is the norm. And if our London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, in his infinite wisdom and belief in diversity, thinks that's the sort of diverse view that it's OK to have on the streets of London and the police don't get involved, don't be shocked, and don't you bloody dare claim to be shocked or upset or care about Jewish people being stabbed on the streets of our capital city in broad daylight. This is on you.
You keep getting proven right every single time. Jews are not safe in this country.
Well, absolutely. No one can be surprised or feeling shocked that this happened. No Jew certainly is. I mean, we had Zach Balansky last week saying this was just a perceived threat. Well, we can see this isn't any perception. This is real. This is happening on the streets. This isn't just an anti-Semitic terror attack. This is an attack on Britain, on the Western liberal democracy and values.
The first politician that uses the word shocking, I might just go and throttle him, because this is anything but shocking. It's the most expected thing is almost overdue, if you ask me, because I mean, I just left Israel last week. I thought it would be the last time we were woken up by explosions, but clearly not.
The Jewish community is our community, and their safety is our safety. And we have to make it absolutely clear, robust, strong leadership, and this has to stop, because otherwise it's almost being normalised, and it's terrifying, and we're sick of it. Enough's enough.
Our plan is a complete step change in how we protect communities, moving beyond piecemeal responses to a sustained nationwide effort, one that ensures that people across the United Kingdom can live freely and without fear.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Smelling salts for Starmer. Good morning, welcome to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan with you for a big 4 hours as we bring you the latest results from the local elections, which spell doom for Labour. Breaking this morning, a turquoise wave washes across the country as Reform UK destroy Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, their leader Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. Meanwhile, the Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are predicted to lose 87% of their councillors, you heard me right. And as BBC Wildlife presenter David Attenborough turns 100, do the lesser spotted Tories now face extinction? What do this morning's results mean for Nigel Farage and his insurgent army? What's your view? Can they now win the next general election? And are they ready for power? I'll be asking their Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick, live on the show. And what does the rise of the Greens mean for the political left in this country? Is right and left now dead as an idea? Is two-party politics over? And the most immediate question facing us this morning, should Starmer stay or go? Now, I want you to join the conversation. My phone number is 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK and your message to 87222. You can also leave us a voice note. We're going to bring you every result as it comes in with reaction from the biggest names in politics and journalism. You can see the show as well as hear it. Of course, we're on the radio, DAB+, in app and online, but this is a TV show now as well. And if you want to see Robert Jenrick and all of my guests, Head to YouTube, search Talking Up We Pop. Is this the end of two-party politics? Is right and left dead? Should Starmer stay or should he go? And can Nigel Farage now win the general election? So much to get through, as the saying goes. Let's talk. Well, as you join us at 6:05 on the morning after the night before, it is a turquoise wave which is washing across the country. So far, Reform have won 323 council seats. It was 322 just 1 second ago. The direction of travel is clear. A massive night for Reform UK, who aren't just winning seats, they're gaining them for the first time in their history. A solid night for the Lib Dems, who are currently treading water politically. Armageddon for Labour. Tories nowhere to be seen. And positive noises around the Green Party. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio for reaction to these results as they come in from Benedict Spence, political commentator and broadcaster. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning.
What are your headlines?
That's remarkable.
Where
isn't
to
it?
start?
Yeah, pretty much. Everybody thought it was going to be bad for Labour. They didn't think it was going to be quite this bad.
They think it's all over. It is now.
It's genuinely staggering. It's very impressive. It must be said, actually. You know, even the sort of the great Green Renaissance hasn't quite emerged in the way that people thought, and it does appear that the concept of the shy Reform voter does indeed hold true, because they're doing much better than people actually thought. There was all the talk beforehand that perhaps Reform had hit a bit of a ceiling, that perhaps they'd lost a bit of their verve, a bit of their momentum. Not a bit of it. Not by the looks of this at all.
Does this suggest that people's voting intentions are at odds with what opinion polls tell us?
Oh, yeah. I think that that's been the case for a while, and it continues to be the case. And it's an interesting thing, because it shows that confidence in the electorate to actually speak their mind still doesn't quite exist there.
You don't really want to tell a woke graduate in a hoodie on the street that you're voting for Nigel Farage, do you?
Well, I tell you what, in a country where you can be arrested for tweets fairly regularly, why on earth would you want to do that? Why would you want to sort of bring the ire on yourself? But no, certainly when people are actually given the option to vote, they definitely do set out their stall. People are very, very fed up with how things have been going. I think this is a direct result of that.
Nigel Farage, earlier in the evening, we've all had very little sleep because we just want to stay across this, but earlier in the evening, as I was drifting in and out of consciousness, he said that left and right is dead now. What does he mean by that?
I think what he's alluding to is that the traditional two-party system in this country, where people sort of fall very easily down Labour or Conservative, doesn't exist. And
I'm left-wing or I'm right-wing.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think when people look at where, obviously, a lot of these Reform votes are coming from, it's the traditional working-class areas in the north of England, which, you know, once upon a time people would have said was very sort of staunchly left-wing. I'm not sure that this is true. I think it's simply that a particularly successful insurgent party has come along, and that people on both sides of the divide are simply rejecting established parties. I don't necessarily buy the idea that the two-party system is dead, or that traditional left and right has been dissolved, and I think that Reform would be wise to think about that going forward. You know, there is a synthesis that you can get between left and right, but you have to be very careful. That's often what parties think, is that they need to somehow occupy the centre ground. Doesn't always work out for them.
Most definitely not. Now, around 9.5 million people voted Labour at the last election. Around 4.5, 5 million voted for Reform, and about 6.5 million for the Tories. So it's interesting, if you look at the electoral map, clearly all bets are off now at the next general election. But it seems that the judgment and the strategy of Nigel Farage is to go after Labour votes in a general election, to take the 9.5 million that voted for Keir Starmer in July 2024 and maybe nick, what, 1, 2, 3 million of those votes?
Yeah, I think there's a rich seam there to
which would be
into.
Unprecedented, wouldn't it?
It would be. Now, yes, to be clear, that
even Thatcher didn't achieve that. Even Boris didn't achieve that.
Yeah, that would be. And, you know, we have to be clear here. This is as a direct result of the hollowing out of Labour's own base by the Labour Party, and of course by the Conservatives as well. But you've got to think about this. You know, where is it that we're seeing these votes coming from? It is in the former industrial heartlands. Now, what does it say ultimately when, given that we've been talking about, you know, things like deindustrialization in this country, the Green Revolution and all that sort of thing, and you've got a party that has got Ed Miliband in it doubling down on, you know, the end of industry in favour of green technology.
Net
to
zero,
then see this.
Net zero terrible for working class communities.
Yeah.
Don't take my word for it. That's what the unions think.
Absolutely, absolutely. But of course, it's not just that. That is the main thing, I think, that's driving a lot of things. You know, people will say it's other things. We'll get to that in just one second. But always these things, I think, are driven by the financial, and that's very clearly what this is. And on this show, you, I, other presenters, callers, we talk about generations of people out of work, in poverty, on benefits. Some people say that they're scroungers. Some people say that they're, you know, that they're people who've been left behind. Whatever it is, there is a wealthy constituency of people there. Wealthy being, you know, the joke, which is ready to be plundered, basically, by reform. That's where the money will be made by them, electorally speaking. The other thing, though, of course, we have to bear in mind is immigration. There's no question about it at all that these communities, when we hear about people in leafy metropolitan London talking about diversity as our strength and how it, you know, immigration has enriched us, and think of the food, they never think for a second about what it has done to all of those communities across the North and the Midlands, where when we talk about no-go zones in London and people go, yeah, that's not really a thing, but then you go to places like Rotherham or Burnley or whatever it is, and you think, there's maybe more of a case to be made for that being there. Now, this is very much, I think, a motivator in these parts of the country, and it's also reflected in another thing. It's quite small still, but it's there. That's the rise of the Muslim independent candidate. And these, you know, these people are gaining power, they're gaining a few seats, they're not going to sweep the board anytime soon, but that tendency that we've seen, again, increase at these sets of elections, that is going to be a major motivator for lots of people who were once Labour voting reform.
We have a Labour hold in Westbourne in Westminster, but with a drop in 26% in support, 41.5%. Greens up 33.1%. So Labour down 26, Greens up 33 in a central London constituency. Labour hold it by the skin of their teeth. What does this tell us, Benedict, about the threat of the Greens to the left-wing vote?
It's definitely there. I don't think it's going to be... Listen, I don't think that the Green vote was ever going to be, and it, you know, people will still say that there's a bit of a bump in the road, but it's never going to be quite what reform is to the Conservatives. I don't think that the Green Alliance makes sense up to a point. You can't marry the idea of, I don't know, liberalism in London and Islamism in the north of England and just go, oh, but the environment, man, and everybody will just happily go along with it. But it is certainly strong enough with that sort of former Corbynista element moving over to it to siphon off quite a lot of support from Labour. So I don't think the Greens are ever going to replace Labour on the left, but absolutely that is a place where lots of people who are very dissatisfied with Labour but are far too left-wing to ever go reform will very happily go, do you know what, yeah, I'm more than prepared to lend them my vote. I'm not really a Lib Dem, so that's where I'll go. Yes, that is going to continue to be a threat. Ironically, the biggest threat to the Greens themselves is not a Labour renaissance, it's their own leader. And the more that people actually see and hear of him and what he has to say, that's the thing that's probably going to temper their own ability to rise. So that's a curious thing. And, you know, it must be said sort of anecdotally, in other parts of the country, I heard a lot of that, people saying that I might otherwise have voted Green, but I don't particularly want Zach Polanski to do well, and I don't want to lend him my vote in any set.
The success of New Labour electorally under Tony Blair was to consolidate a party of two factions, which is 50% metropolitan sort of social liberals in our cities, and then working class, patriotic, common sense, socially conservative voters in the North and the Midlands. And it was Blair who managed to consolidate those two groups and win power. And it seems that Labour have abandoned the latter group, probably because they've become such a London-centric outfit.
A London-centric outfit, a party that increasingly leans into the idea of ethnic minorities being distinct voting blocks, which, you know, most of us might sit here and think that's a rather dangerous and divisive thing to do, but they do it and they're happy to do it. but also because, as you sort of said in there, the key words there were socially conservative, and a lot of these people always were sort of socially conservative.
They think there are two sexes. They believe in strong borders. They're left wing.
Yeah, they've got two eyes and a brain. They're normal people, and actually they don't like this sort of, frankly, what you might call intellectual doping, which sort of goes on from people who think they're terribly clever because they went to a minor Russell Group university and therefore can indulge in these sorts of ideas.
And got a 2-2 for the average smoke too much weed.
And the average person is sat there going, I'd like to keep my job, I'd like it to put a roof over my head and for me to be able to have a family, I'd like a bit of dignity in my life and dignity in work. I now don't have any of these things necessarily, and in fact I haven't had them for several generations now. We're getting to that point where it is intergenerational, people being locked out of work. It's no surprise that after a while those people were going to drift away from Labour, and I think in the post-Brexit era they've just been absolutely hemorrhaging, these people.
Most definitely. Good morning and welcome to a Talk Breakfast election special, and a turquoise wave washes across the country at the expense of the Tories and Labour. Nigel Farage, just a few minutes ago, he's not had too much sleep, has said that now we can win the general election. Sarah has messaged the show. Good morning, Sarah. She says, Mark, could you use the local election results so far to predict what would be the result if there were a general election? Well, Christian, we've booked a top pollster, haven't we? So we're going to get the inside track on that one. Based upon the swings we're seeing, Sarah, then most definitely they would be contenders for an overall majority in the House of Commons. 2.5 years is a long time, but we will certainly crunch the numbers. Scott says, good morning, waking up to the election results, feeling like Britain could be about to become a better place. Mark in Croydon, good morning, Mark, and good morning, Benedict. I felt reform would always do well as people are still shy to say they vote reform. Perhaps this win will make people more vocal. Only concern is, what does the traditional left-wing vote mean? Is it Gaza instead of the old-fashioned miners' vote? Mark, thank you for that. Dave in Aberdeen, good morning, Mark. No doubt the two main parties will spin the results and Starmer will point towards the Iran war and free breakfast clubs. For God's sake, man, go. You're so right, Dave. He's got Tourette's syndrome, hasn't he, about his breakfast club. Well, let me tell you, talk about breakfast, Starmer's toast, isn't it? He's got egg on his face. Wake up and smell the coffee. My question to you. We've got so many, but a big one going into this break. Should he stay or should he go? Sir Keir Starmer, your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. More live election results next.
Peter Capaldi!
It just so happens that it's all "you're amazing."
Right. Paul White! face down and a dog sniffed my crotch. It was very, very embarrassing.
Staying out for the summer.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:20 Talk Breakfast election special, and breaking this morning, a turquoise wave washes across the country as Reform UK destroy Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, their leader Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. Is that true? Is this a dress rehearsal for a national vote in 2.5 years' time? Meanwhile, the Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are predicted to lose 87% of their councillors. And whatever happened to the Tories? Is Nigel Farage right that left versus right is now dead? Here's a voice note from Andrew.
Morning, Mark. Morning, Benedict. Magnificent to see the demolition job of Keir Starmer and the Labour Party this morning and the votes coming in. We all knew it was happening, but it's always gratifying to see it in black and white. I've got a theory on what might happen next with Starmer. We all know that he's never going to resign. We all know that he said he's going to fight within any single challenge that comes in his direction. But if it gets too much for him, there's every possibility, given we all know his arrogance and his personality and it's himself first, that he would just turn around and go, do you know what? If I can't do it, nobody else will, so I'm going to call a general election. He would do that just to spite everybody that in his world has backstabbed him.
Thank you very much for our first voice note of the day, Andrew. And I share your jubilation at this political revolution, and I'll tell you for why. I don't care who fixes the country, but it's quite clear that we need change. We need border control. We need to fix the potholes. We need to fix the economy. We need to get rid of wokery in our public institutions. We need to drill, baby, drill. We need to build a couple of houses. We need to be business friendly. We need common sense policies. I don't care who does it, but it's quite clear from the votes that we've seen as they come in, the total collapse of Labour, that people have had enough and they want change. Graham the Joiner has messaged the show. Hi, Mark, and hello, Benedict. The destruction of the Labour Party is music to my ears, like the way they're destroying this great country and the British way of life. Joanna, good morning, Mark and Benedict. Well done, Nigel Farage. They've done it, but what a mess they're picking up. They're going to need a minor miracle to sort this out. And Nathan in Perth, who voted Reform, said, sorry, Mark, I disagree with Benedict. Two-party is dead, the two-party system. They lie, then say change is coming, and change turns into yet another lie. Trust in the two of those main parties has gone forever. Well, of course, that's the elephant in the room, isn't it, Benedict? The Tories. On the day that the wildlife presenter David Attenborough turns 100, are the Tories now facing extinction? The lesser spotted Kemi.
Well, this is the thing, and when people say the two-party system is dead, the immediate answer to that has to be, so what are you replacing it with? Do people genuinely believe that we're going to move to a uniparty state, or that we're just going to have coalition governments with 4 or 5 different parties in perpetuity? I don't actually foresee either of these things being the status quo. The question about the Conservatives is, listen, Kemi Badenoch, having had a pretty dodgy start, has massively improved. Her own personal polling is phenomenal, actually, given where it was, and comparing it to just about every other political leader in this country. The issue that she faces is her party is still a toxic brand in of itself, and there's not that much talent behind her at the moment. But I think the Conservatives are playing a very long game here. Now, this is not me saying that they are definitely going to bounce back, but I think you'd be a fool to write them off given how much institutional influence they still have, how much name recognition they still have, and also given quite how fast the rise of Reform has been. It can dissipate just as quickly as it rose up, because what Reform doesn't have is that kind of institutional loyalty. We were talking about traditional Labour voters and how long it's taken them to actually abandon a party that's long since abandoned them. And actually it's the same with Conservatives. It took, 14 years of being regularly slapped around the face for Conservative voters to finally go, do you know what, we've actually had enough of you people. Reform can't rely on that same sort of loyalty. If they mess up and things start to go wrong, people are not going to hold on to them in the same way that they held on to the parties that they'd grown up with. So the idea that they are definitely dead, I just think it's far too premature. And I think that only one of those two parties can survive long-term, Reform or the Conservatives. So it will be an either or. There's not going to be a situation where, I mean, obviously both parties can still exist in some way, but if we're talking about actual forces in British politics, only one is going to win out long term. So, there can only be one strong party on the right. Inevitably, there's going to be, another sort of reckoning on the left. To which, again, I'd say genuinely, do you think people are going to stick with the Greens in its current incarnation in perpetuity? Is that really going to replace Labour? No. Are the Lib Dems going to replace Labour? Probably not. Something else might come and replace Labour. But genuinely, do people see a perpetual state of coalitions? I can see at the next general election it being decided by a coalition, just like we had one however many years ago, 14 years ago. That doesn't mean it's going to be the permanent state of politics in this country.
Is playing a waiting game the safest strategy for the Tories? Are they waiting for reform to be probed further and to potentially unravel?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't sound like they have a proactive plan.
Right now, Kemi is their best asset by some distance. Keep on putting her in front of the public, keep talking common sense.
In the absence of Bobby J, Robert Jenrick, there isn't a figure that could replace her.
There's nothing else. So actually you might as well stick around this central unifying figure. I mean, for heaven's sake, it's worked for Reform, having one big figure that everybody knows and building this person up over time. That certainly helped them. So I think that is their best strategy. And they have to sort of for the Conservatives to survive long term, they have to approach this like it's a complete rebuild job. It's a derelict house, foundations are all rotten, and it's going to take time to build the whole thing back up. That's what they have to do. It is possible. Right now it's not in the conversation, but are they dead and buried? I think you'd be very foolish to write them off at this stage.
Why?
Because ultimately the odds of Reform actually coming in and succeeding and doing everything that they've done are very low. And I know that might sound a little churlish to a lot of people, given how well they've just done in the election.
That means you're telling
but
me
they've not got into government.
So
yet.
what you're telling me is they can win the election after this one rather than the next election.
Well, I think people would be foolish, given that we're actually 3 years away from a general election, and there is nothing to say actually that we're about to have one anytime soon. Labour will cling to power like there's no tomorrow if they sense that there's any possibility that they would lose an election. I don't think they're going to call one early. Not at all. Unless they're forced to somehow. I don't actually see what the mechanism for that is. So that's about 3 years. Then let's say Reform actually do get in, which I actually think is not necessarily the most likely outcome despite these results, and I'll tell you why in a second. But let's say Reform get in and they get 5 years. Well, that's 8 years in total. Would you actually genuinely be prepared to sit here and say it's going to be a fantastic 8 years and everything is going to go well? You'd like to, but actually, given the way things have gone in this country in the last couple of years, I think you'd be a fool to put money on that. And given actually how it was that, we've got from this point, we've got from point A to point B, I simply feel that, as I was saying about loyalty, voter loyalty, I don't think people would stick with Farage and Reform if they did the same sorts of things that Labour did. Promised one thing, ended up doing another. I don't think a lot of people would stick around with them long term. But what I would just sort of say very quickly is, I'm not even sure that a Reform majority is the most likely thing at the next general election. And I'll tell you why. And I think these results possibly make this outcome more likely. The Labour Party, the Greens, the Lib Dems, the SNP, Plaid, all of these, they are going to be terrified of this result. They are going to go full meltdown, talking about the far-right, fascism, the danger that Reform poses. They are far more likely, in those circumstances, to vote tactically, to try to put together some sort of grand coalition to keep Reform out. It might not work, but trust me, if they sense that there's any chance that Reform will get a majority, those parties will start, sotto voce, maybe not even officially, but they'll start to work together to keep Reform out. And I think that these results will focus a lot of minds on the left and going, actually, what is it that we really like? Do we want to, the Greens, the Lib Dems, do we genuinely believe that we're going to get power? Or actually is what we want just to spoil Nigel Farage's party? I reckon they're that vindictive.
Breaking news as you join us on Talk Breakfast at 6:29. Reform UK has gained Newcastle under Lyme Council from the Conservatives. The council has historically swung between no overall control and a Labour majority between the 70s and 2021. 2022, the Tories took control. It's now been taken by Reform UK for the first time. Breaking news, Newcastle under Lyme Council taken by Reform UK. It's what we expected, Benedict, a strong performance from Reform UK in the so-called Red Wall in the northeast of England, the working class heartlands of this country.
Yeah, this is I mean, honestly, this is the sort of thing that has been in the works since Brexit. This is the complete rejection of what the Labour Party has become, and frankly also a rejection of the alternatives that are offered on the left. And ultimately, they have no one but themselves to blame. The Labour Party has, over the decades, despite 14 years of the Conservatives being in charge, and having the opportunity, therefore, to sell something to the working man of the North and the Midlands, they have roundly failed to do so. It comes as no surprise that this is happening.
6:30, the local election results are pouring in thick and fast. We've got the biggest names in politics and journalism for reaction, but the headlines are very clear. It is a turquoise wave which is washing across the country. So can Farage now win a general election? And should Starmer stay or go?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast and a local election results special. Breaking news as you join us at 6:33 in the morning. Reform UK have gained Newcastle-Underlyne Council from the Conservatives. It's historically swung between no overall control and a Labour majority. The Tories took this council in 2022, but it's now been won by Reform UK for the first time. Let's get your reaction to the results as they come in. Here's a voice note from Jay.
Morning, guys. Fantastic show as always. Listen every morning, every evening. I just want to say this is the first time since Labour have been in power that I've actually woke up feeling positive, smiled. You know, the fuel prices are up, the taxes are up, the immigration's still silly. You know, they haven't listened to us on anything. All that's still going on, but I'm smiling. You know why? Because the people of the United Kingdom are not as woke as we think. They're not as fed up and hate this country as much as people like to make out. You know, everyone seems like they're pulling together and united. You know, I still can't believe that the Greens got the seats they got. It still shocks me that people would even vote for Lansky after what he said about our brave police officers, but there you go. Fantastic, guys. Well done to everyone that got up and voted.
Well, I will say that your tone, Jay, speaks for many. This from Richie in Grimsby. Good morning, Mark, and good morning, Benedict. A glorious morning in Grimsby. The turquoise tidal wave taking 13 out of 14 wards. If Labour got spanked any harder, They'd need a ball gag and a safe word. I mean, what a poetic text message. You guys are the best, let me tell you. Matt says, good morning, Mark, and hello, Benedict. Matt from the East Midlands here. For once, I'm getting my Working Brits morning news with a smile on my face. What joyous news it is to see the reform gained so far. In answer to the question of should Starmer stay or should he go, for me it's, for goodness sakes, go. But what's next terrifies me, and as they remain in power. Thank you for that, Matt. Simon, hi, Mark. Despite Labour having a nightmare last night, Starmer will not throw in the towel. His next move will be talking about a reset, and will reshuffle his cabinet next week. It'll keep him in his job for a while longer. And Paul says, hi, Mark. Starmer should definitely stay, as he's a vote winner for reform. That's Paul in Luton. Thank you for all of your messages. Let's hear from David Lammy, who's been speaking overnight.
It is not unusual to be given a message by the electorate at midterm elections. Let's wait to see what comes in tonight. But yes, on the doorstep, it has been tough. There has been frustration, and we will have to pick up pace and really hear the public and deliver for the public, not the status quo. What people want to see is genuine change in their lives, and they want to believe that the Labour Party can deliver for them.
Well, I will tell you something. They're not going to deliver in Newcastle under Lyme, which is in North Staffordshire in the Midlands, because Reform have taken Newcastle under Lyme from the Conservatives. It's been no overall majority, a Labour majority until 2021, but it's now in the hands of Reform UK. With me in the studio, Benedict Spence. And Benedict, many of my viewers and listeners are messaging the show and leaving voice notes saying that for the first time in a long time, they're waking up with a smile on their face. Why would that be?
Well, it's because these results, I think, reflect that it doesn't have to be a single direction of travel, which is ever more, ever more depressingly leftwards and technocratic.
Right, okay, yes.
Yeah, I think, well, leftwards and technocratic, we can call it what we want. We all understand what it is that we're talking about, and that is that there has been a perception in this country that there is a vision of politics that is sort of ever more centre-left, but leaning harder and harder leftwards the further you go, and that we're sort of run by a group of people that actually believe a certain thing that is completely at odds with how the rest of the country view, frankly, how the world works. This shows that there is an alternative, and that, actually it is incredibly popular. I would caution against people thinking that it's definitely going to happen now, because, of course, we've had this false dawn with Brexit, which is, we all thought we were getting something, and then the ranks were closed and everything happened to try to hamper it, and actually what we got was not at all what people envisaged it would be. Not because what they envisaged was not possible, but simply because the powers that be had no interest in pursuing that. But, the reality is, we've all known for a very long time, it's clear as day to see in the polling in this country, that Reform UK are very popular, that they represent, if nothing else, a revolt against established politics in this country, a continuation of that revolt that began with Brexit, and sooner or later that revolt was going to come to the fore. Now, a set of local election results, does that mean right now that Reform are going to become the next government? No, it does not. Actually, lots of things will again be arrayed against them to prevent that from happening. But it's a positive thing. It shows that actually you can enact change, or you can try at the very least, in this country, which, given that my views on the democratic state in this country for some time have been rather morose, is a quite upbeat thing.
Well, on Talk Breakfast, we always like to put on a smile on your face, and someone that will wake up with a smile this morning is Nigel Farage, because the latest figures for councils in England, 348 gains. That is 348 gains for Reform UK. Labour down 248. Lib Dems up 35. Tories down 135. The Greens up 26. Others minus 24. Very bad news for Labour. A solid performance from the Greens. The Lib Dems treading water. The Tories over. And Reform now hopeful, according to their leader Nigel Farage, of not just dominating nationally, locally, but potentially in a position to win the next general election. So a very, very positive result so far. The headline figure that you need to know is that Labour are expected to lose 80%. Sorry, let me correct that. 87% of their councillors. You heard me right. Labour expected to lose 87% of their councillors. If that happens, Benedict Spence, what amount of pressure will be on the Prime Minister from his own party?
It'll be huge, because they will recognise that it's no longer that Keir Starmer is simply toxic to himself, he's toxic to the brand in general, to the party.
And it won't just be the cabinet, it won't just be the backbenchers, it won't just be the unions that back the party, it'll be the people that stuff the envelopes and ring the doorbells.
Yeah, they won't want to have to go through this again. They're not going to be prepared to work, basically, for an administration that doesn't work for them. The tricky thing, I suppose, now is, you said it's not just going to be the cabinet, but that is actually what we're relying on now, is that you can have sort of revolts amongst the grassroots and the Prime Minister might not actually do anything because he'll think, well, I've got 3 years to turn it around. What matters is if the big beasts themselves start circling. On the front page of the Times today, it says, Prime Minister urged by Miliband to set timeline for leaving. I think that actually is the most significant thing, is that finally you've got somebody beginning to break ranks. And, it does say in the copy, Mr. Miliband remains a supporter of the Prime Minister, but you can't really get away with saying, well, OK, but when you're leaving, and say, but I still support you. And this is going to put the Prime Minister in a very difficult position, because either he's got to set a timeline and listen to Mr. Miliband, or he's got to sack him. And that's going to start the timeline, ultimately. There's no way you can fudge that.
You're right, because Miliband's people have not denied the existence of that conversation, which Christian and I discussed before we came on air. A conversation was had between the Energy Secretary and the Prime Minister about his future. They've only denied the nature of that conversation, that we don't recognise that account. But either way, Miliband's in trouble. The problem you've got, and it reminds me of Boris in his final days, which is that Starmer doesn't have the authority to sack anyone anymore.
He doesn't, and he lost the authority to do all sorts of things with his party when he was unable to stop his backbenchers from voting down attempts to reform welfare spending in this country, which, let's be clear, this is at the heart of many problems that he faces. And everybody's got their pet reason for hating Keir Starmer, but the tax burden on this country is phenomenal. It's huge on working people. The amount that the state is spending is phenomenal. It's unbearable. When Keir Starmer came in, he promised a more grown-up, mature, frankly technocratic approach to politics. And he's been unable to push with that because his own backbenchers didn't let him. The second that happened, I think it was curtains.
Breaking news, and this is huge. The Conservatives have won back control of Westminster City Council. The party has seized this council from Labour, who gained control for the first time since the 60s in 2022. The Tories have Westminster City Council back. The overall picture is a clear one. It is a turquoise wave which is washing across the country. Reform UK, the clear victor so far, sweeping up seats at the expense of Labour and the Tories. Labour expected to lose 87% of their councillors. Reform UK have gained Newcastle Underline Borough Council from the Conservatives. That's in Staffordshire, in the Midlands, North Staffordshire. Labour have lost Oxford, Tameside, Tamworth, Exeter, Hartlepool, Wandsworth and Redditch. All of those areas have been red for decades. Now no overall control for those seats. They've held Chorley, Halton, Lincoln, Plymouth, Salford, Reading, Wigan and Merton, but with a drastically reduced majority. The Tories have held Fareham, Harlow and Broxbourne. The Lib Dems have gained Stockport and Portsmouth from no overall control and held Eastleigh and Richmond upon Thames. Do you think, Benedict Spence, that the Lib Dems are going to feature in our conversation this morning?
Not much. I think we can probably just leave it there, to be honest.
Who are they there for?
Honestly,
what is their job now?
I was actually thinking about this last night. Actually, what are they for? What role do they play, other than to be sort of spoilers and sort of an acceptable alternative for disaffected centrist Tories who can't actually bring themselves to vote Labour, Green or Reform. That's sort of their role right now. And I'm sure that there'll be lots of Lib Dems who are saying, that's a deeply unfair sort of assessment of what their party is. But actually, if what you want to be doing is picking up swing voters, which, right now we have an awful lot of disaffected voters in this country, you need to have something that you can actually sell people on. And it's got to be more than simply Ed Davey giving you sort of gimmicks. and sound bites and stuff like that. At the very least, Zach Polanski, who does the soundbite and the gimmick very well, does offer something tangible. It's insane, but he offers stuff to people, which is a bit more of a vision. Ed Davey doesn't do that. The average Lib Dem MP is not particularly well known. It's a curiosity. It's a leftover, I think, of a bygone era. And actually, I think that it's one of those things that it can play a role, say, at a general election. It'll pick up seats. It'll take votes from other people. But I think the days when the Lib Dems were potential kingmakers, or indeed were kingmakers, that's gone now. That's not a thing.
The problem for the Lib Dems is that they've lost their way ideologically, haven't they? They used to be a centre-left party that was business-friendly and socially conservative. They've gone crazy woke, and they've gone very left-wing.
Yeah.
It is simply another left-wing progressive woke socialist party.
Yeah, could you actually say what it is that they offer that's that dramatically different from Labour in its most sort of Starmerite form? Not really. And even if you could, it's clearly not enough to win anybody over at a time when you'd be thinking, because of course Starmer did get into power on the basis of being, look, I'm sensible, I'm a bit dull, and I'm not going to destroy the country. You'd be kind of thinking a lot of people, if we're constantly told, like to gravitate towards the centre, and they've abandoned the Conservatives and they're abandoning Labour. If that were true, the Lib Dems ought to be doing very well, and they're not. So what does that tell you about what the average person actually thinks about them or knows about them? If nothing else, Mr. Davey is not doing a very good job at creating a fresh brand that people can identify with.
Most definitely. If you're just joining us, this is a Talk Breakfast election special, and Reform UK so far have gained a council and 348 seats. Labour have lost 248. They're expected to lose 87% of their councillors, which is truly seismic. Truly extraordinary. Dan has said, good morning, Mark. This set of election results are historic. It's united the country in saying that Labour have failed us. That's Dan in Suffolk. Matt in Grimsby, good morning, Mark. Keep Starmer in power. He's doing a tremendous job for Reform UK. Amanda says, good morning, Mark, and hello, Benedict. Reform UK must now stand strong. Labour and the left will dig the dirt on Nigel in their usual vile way. They have no shame. Let's take another voice note.
Good morning, Mark. Damon from Wigan. I think the election results, which I've been watching during the night, have been impressive for Reform UK. And it's time the elite understands that the British public are not fools. The British public see what is going on, and the British public will vote, and vote hard. As it's been said, when the herd moves, change happens.
That's a great quote, isn't it? Thank you for that, Damon. Well, it's 6:48. It's an election results special here on Talk Breakfast. At the moment, the headline is very clear. A turquoise wave is washing across the country. But will that translate to a general election victory for Nigel Farage? That's next.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in, as to all the people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:51 and a turquoise wave washes across the country in a Talk local elections special. Very good news for Nigel Farage. Can he now win nationally? But we're going to move to another story briefly. Police have arrested a man on suspicion of a public order offence and a possession of an offensive weapon near the home of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He's now been charged. Norfolk Constabulary said in a statement officers were called to Wolferton shortly after 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday following a report that a man was behaving in an intimidating way in the village. The force said officers attended. The man was arrested on suspicion of a public order offence and possession of an offensive weapon. He's been charged. According to the Telegraph newspaper, the arrest came after the former Prince, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, was confronted by a balaclava-clad man whilst walking his dogs. Let's get reaction from Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the Queen and former royal journalist. Good morning, Dickie.
Morning, Mark.
This is a worrying story for the community, and it's a concern for King Charles because it's a reminder, isn't it, that the welfare of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor remains paramount.
I think you're absolutely right. The welfare, not only just for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, but the welfare for everybody remains paramount. The fact that somebody was able to confront him is not surprising. Sandringham is a very big open estate. It has public access, it has public right-of-way, it has roads passing through the estate. The fact that this man was parked up, got out of his car, had a balaclava on and went chasing after Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, people shouldn't be surprised about that. The fact that his security stepped in and got him away safely, they're the ones that have got to be applauded.
This wouldn't happen if Andrew Mountbatten Windsor had stayed on the Windsor estate.
No, it wouldn't have happened. He was living in a over 30-roomed home. It had 90 acres of ground, and if he went anywhere, if he went riding, he would drive to the Royal Mews at Windsor Castle. He is an ordinary person now. He's an ordinary person in the community. Yes, his family are senior royals. His brother is king, but he's got to muck in with everybody else. There is going to be this sort of ghoulish behaviour. We had a couple of weeks ago a couple of people standing on a wall trying to look into the windows of Marsh Farm. These things are going to happen, and I think the security, his private security, is going to be well aware that these things can happen and will take the adequate precautions. But yet, if he'd been at Royal Lodge, it wouldn't have happened, but he's not at Royal Lodge, and it has.
Does it make his continued tenure at Sandringham unsustainable, Dickie, on a security level?
I don't believe so. He's been there since February. This is the first incident. Here we are in May, so he's been there for 2 months and nothing untoward.
But is Sandringham too public? Are there any number of security personnel that can make sure he's safe?
Well, his personal security personnel can make sure he's safe. Look, he's probably been out for walks on a daily basis. This is the first time something has happened. It presumably that he was probably watched to see where he is going, because it wasn't within the immediate vicinity of Marsh Farm, and he was followed and the car parked up and the guy got out. These are the things, unfortunately, happen in today's world. His security will be mindful of that, will take extra precautions, and he might well be driven further afield where and to different places that people don't know about.
And clearly there's no love lost now, Dickie, between the King and his younger brother, given the embarrassing headlines that Andrew has brought to the family. That said, the King is ultimately responsible for the safety of his brother, so it's a headache for him politically and practically.
It is a headache for him, but it's a headache that he is able to cope with. that security is available. He is paying for the security. And, you know, these sort of things can happen. Anybody and everybody. Are the immediate family responsible? No, they're not responsible. The individual is responsible, and the people that are surrounding him and guarding him are responsible. Because the king can't babysit him. And he's got to take, Andrew's got to take adequate precautions. This has been a salutary lesson, and they will have learnt from it.
Briefly, if we can, Dickie, because I need to get back to the local election results. This will be very unsettling for Andrew. No doubt he'll be traumatised by this.
It will be unsettling. Look, you know, he might be traumatised. Look, the man was probably more traumatised flying a Sea King helicopter during the Falklands War, acting as a decoy to Exocet missiles. He's a grown up. He's learnt to control and combat issues, and he will deal with this accordingly. The fact that one person chased him, it doesn't mean to say the whole world is chasing him. His security will take adequate precautions, severe adequate precautions, and Andrew will be mindful of where he goes. And they might well, in order to walk the dogs, drive further afield in, you know, unrecognizable vehicles.
Dickie, always a great privilege to have you on the show. I wish we had longer. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the Queen, former royal journalist as well. Well, this is a Talk Breakfast election results special, and my goodness, what a tidal wave of support that Reform UK have experienced in the last 24 hours. It's a turquoise tsunami, folks. Reform so far have gained 349 seats. You heard me right. Labour have lost 245. At the latest, the Tories have regained Westminster City Council, which is a totemic council to win back. But really the headlines are all about Nigel Farage and whether now he can win the next general election. Well, I'll be asking the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, in just a couple of minutes' time. Those really are the two headlines, aren't they, so far, Benedict? Whether Reform can translate this to an election victory at a general election, and whether Starmer survives.
Well, clearly the groundswell of support for Reform, be that because of dissatisfaction with the government itself or because of love for Reform, exists. It's clearly there, and it's possibly bigger than people were led to believe in the first place. So yes, can they win a general election? The fundamentals are there. Whether or not that translates into victory in a couple of years' time remains to be seen, but certainly that is a possibility that we should be taking seriously. As to whether or not Keir Starmer can survive, I mean, what other conclusion can you take other than that this is a complete rejection of, at the very least, him as Prime Minister? We can say everything else we want about established politics or the party, but absolutely, here we are, a couple of years now into his administration, he has roundly failed to convince many parts of the country that he is the man to lead it.
What do you think, folks? Can Nigel Farage now go on to win the next general election? What does this mean for the political climate of this country? Is it the death of the uniparty? Is Nigel Farage right that there's no more left or right? What are the implications of this seismic set of results which are coming in thick and fast? Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, is next.
My fellow Americans, let me begin by congratulating the team at NASA and our brave astronauts on the successful launch of Artemis II. It was quite something. It will be traveling further than any manned rocket has ever flown and will very substantially pass the moon, go around it, and come back home from a distance that has never been done before. It's amazing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
1 minute past 7, and welcome to a Talk election results breakfast special. And breaking this morning, political history is playing out before our eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country, as Reform UK inflict seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, their leader Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. Well, we're going to speak to the biggest names in politics and journalism for reaction to this extraordinary political event. We have the latest figures at the moment. Reform UK have gained 349 seats. Labour have lost 25. The Conservatives have lost 136. The Greens potentially will be strong in the big cities, including London. The Lib Dems treading water. But it's all about Farage. So let's get reaction from the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning to you, Mark. Well, it's been a remarkable night. I've been in the West Midlands and I've been at a number of counts, and the results so far in the West Midlands are completely outstanding. We're delighted. And elsewhere in the country. All over the areas in the Midlands and the North, known as the Red Wall, we have repainted it, Mark, in a bright, optimistic turquoise wall. And it's a much better wall for that repainting, frankly. And Labour have been completely and utterly decimated, deservedly so. And places like Hartlepool, 12 out of 12. North East Lincolnshire, 14 out of 15. And many, many more such results in Wigan. We've taken 22 out of 22 seats from Labour. And in Tameside, incredible results there, the heartland of Angela Rayner. And again, I think we've taken some 18 there. These are just truly seismic results. It's like a sort of political earthquake, registering about 8 or 9 on the Richter scale.
Well, the results may be better than even Reform anticipated.
Yes, I mean, we're obviously hopeful, and we wanted the more the merrier, so to speak. And obviously, the bulk of the results are still to come, to look forward to through the day. I am in the heart of Birmingham. We've got a sort of a war room set up here, and we'll be going to the Birmingham City Count later this morning. They start at about 10 o'clock, and I think by early afternoon we'll have a good direction of travel as to how that's going to play out. That's going to be real nip and tuck stuff between us, the Greens, and the Independents. And based on what's happened overnight, I think Labour will be dramatically reduced in Birmingham. It's going to be a fascinating contest.
Now, as you say, we await many more results, but the mood music so far for your party is very positive. Can this translate into a general election victory?
Well, not immediately, but it should translate into the Prime Minister recognising that for the good of the country he should go, and that would and should herald a general election sooner than 3 years away. I mean, let's just take a step back at the context of what these results are. They're essentially a rejection of the uniparty, two parties who've governed and completely messed up everything, both economically and culturally. It's a rejection of the smearing, the sneering, the libelling from the establishment media, who behaved abominably in recent months, trying to essentially sort of kill us off electorally, and they've utterly been rejected by millions of voters who said that actually this whole thing, I mean, the country is in a terrible state, and we've all been gaslit to a huge degree. We were told by the establishment and the establishment media organisations that we need mass immigration and we need net stupid zero. We don't need either. They've both been a catastrophe, and the sooner we get rid of them, the better. And then the other thing is that, we've been running 10 majority councils for almost a year, and week after week, newspapers would put us on the front page saying we were doing a terrible job. Well, take, for example, Staffordshire. Newcastle-under-Lyme, the whole council is up for grabs. We're going to win the whole council. That's part of Staffordshire. And so voters in places like that are saying, actually, Reform have been doing a decent job. We've got lots right. We've learned some lessons on certain things. But all over the country, voters are saying, thanks for what you're doing so far. Keep at it. And we're going to give you more councils to run or be the biggest party of. And that is a vindication of what we've been up to so far. And voters are saying, lots more to come, please.
Now, Richard, you are a politician. You're the deputy leader of your party. You're also a very successful businessman. You know your way around a spreadsheet. You understand the bottom line. We can agree that this country lives beyond its means. And should you win power, we're going to have to shrink the size of the state. We're going to probably have to have austerity times 100. How do you square that with the working class support voting for Reform UK?
Well, the clue is in the word you've just used there. Work, Mark. Work is a great thing, and we should celebrate it. But you can't have lots of people making a lifestyle choice not to working to claim welfare. And you can't have lots of foreign nationals who supposedly came here to work, but haven't come here to work. They've come here to rip us off. And frankly, that's why voters are voting for reform. So we need to we want a world-leading welfare system for the genuinely vulnerable, the genuinely disabled who cannot work, and the those who are genuinely unemployed looking for work.
That said, austerity times 100 is going to impact plenty of Reform UK voters.
Don't interrupt. I haven't finished.
I have to interrupt because you might well be Deputy Prime Minister, so I have to hold you to account. If you have austerity, it's going to hurt Reform UK voters.
No, it's not. It's going to delight them. If you scrap net stupid zero, you save tens of billions of pounds every year. You reduce people's bills. You create growth and prosperity and high skills by drill, baby, drill as much as possible offshore in the North Sea, onshore in places like North Lincolnshire, where there's about a decade's worth of shale gas. That brings the bills down. You stop paying 20 billions of pounds of voluntary interest of taxpayers' cash to the rich, to the commercial banks on the Bank of England's printed money. There's so much more besides. Wherever we look, there's waste, waste, waste. And I want to cut it, Mark.
Well, of course, we can all support that. What do you think, Richard, needs to happen between now and the general election? What do Reform need to do to guarantee the keys to number 10?
Deliver on these councils that we are running and being given the privilege of running from
That's
these
going to be hard, isn't it? Because they're all skint.
Well, yeah, look,
do you need to manage expectations?
No, you say they're all skint. But the truth is, we're actually identifying significant savings. We're delivering better services at a lower cost by renegotiating contracts, taking some things in-house that have been outsourced. Lots and lots of areas. Hundreds of millions have already been saved and identified for saving in this current year, and much more besides, in areas that nobody's previously looked before. So we're looking everywhere, and I think that common sense, business-like approach to things is what people want, and working in sort of constructive but critical friend with the council officers who learn to respect us and realise that we've got a serious job to do. We're negotiating on behalf of the taxpayers, and we want better value, please.
And we can agree on that. Richard, in terms of where we're at now, the Prime Minister in post, you've said he should resign. The issue we've got is that his likely replacements could be Ed Miliband, who will double down on what you're calling net stupid zero. You could have Angela Rayner, who will have the backing of the unions, who will expect their pound of flesh if she wins power. Or you've potentially got a figure like Andy Burnham, if he gets back into the Commons, on a very, very left-wing agenda. Is there not a case to be made in the national interest to keep Starmer, because the alternatives would be worse?
Well, you talk about Angela Rayner and the unions. Let me just remind you that millions of union members have literally yesterday voted Reform. people from the oil and gas sector, people from the steel sector, people from the refining sector, who realise they've been completely and utterly legged over by the Wallies in Westminster who came up with this net zero stuff that has destroyed industries. So actually, maybe what the Labour leadership needs to do is to listen to some of those unions in the industrial sector, not just the civil service unions, and say, yeah, we've got this badly wrong. We need to U-turn on some of this stuff.
However, Richard, if Starmer goes, his replacement will be more left-wing. So surely that's an argument to keep him until the next general election. Another argument to keep him is that he's an election winner for you guys. Keir Starmer is your greatest asset.
Well, look, if there's a
he's
new
the
Prime
golden
Minister,
goose that lays the eggs.
Starmer is no golden goose. Don't be ridiculous. If we have someone further from the left, the bond market...
Stuffed turkey.
Well, stuff something.
But it's reckless, Richard. It's reckless of you to say that Starmer should go, because his replacement, as you say, will freak out the bond markets and will probably have an economic crisis.
Which will advance the general election, which is what everybody wants.
Are you calling for an economic crisis? That's not in the national interest.
I'll tell you what is in the national interest is to accelerate a general election. The way that happens is a new Prime Minister after Starmer should recognise they've got the finances all wrong, and things that we're honest with people. Things are likely to get worse before they get better. But the good news is there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that is the light of a reform government.
Big congratulations, Richard Tice, on a seismic set of results for Reform UK, which are coming in thick and fast. So far, they've gained 350 seats. It is a turquoise tsunami. Will that translate into a general election victory? Nigel Farage certainly thinks so. My thanks there to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Let's now get the Labour view, and Carl Turner, MP. He's the MP for Hull East, of course, elected as a Labour MP in 2024. He's had the whip removed, given his opposition to proposed changes to jury trials. He joins us now. Hello, Carl.
Good morning, Mark.
You can't be too surprised by the results that are coming in, which would suggest that Labour may lose 87% of their councillors.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking, isn't it? It's certainly more than a flesh wound, Mark. It's catastrophic in my view, and indeed it may be mitigated a bit when the London results come in, but it's still a significant number of seats lost. We were defending 8 seats in Hull. We lost 7 directly to Reform and 1 to the Lib Dems. It's a terrible night for the Labour Party. Anybody who's suggesting this isn't really, really, really bad is just in la-la land.
Who's to blame, Carl?
Well, on the doorstep, Mark, I'm not happy about this, but it was Keir Starmer that was coming up. Policy a bit, the U-turns on this and that, and the fact that we started with winter fuel allowance and then on to welfare benefits, those things came up a bit. What didn't come up on the doorstep, sadly, was the stuff that we are doing, the stuff that I think we can be proud of.
House building?
Well, we're not doing much of that. We're doing a bit, but not enough.
Yeah, you've made progress with planning, but it's not necessarily translated into millions of homes yet.
Exactly, and we've got a target for that. I think it's probably optimistic, if I'm being honest with you. There's a lot to be done in that regard, especially on planning, but we are starting. But look, the stuff that was coming off on the doorstep was Keir Starmer. I mean, this is a shock to me, but I'm going to say it because I'm trying to be honest. Keir Starmer on the doorstep in Hull, in my patch in East Hull, is more toxic than Jeremy Corbyn ever was. And Jeremy Corbyn was never very popular in East Hull. I'm afraid to say Keir is more unpopular.
And why is that? Why is he more toxic, more unpopular than even Jeremy Corbyn, who was mainly supported by Labour voters in the metropolitan areas?
I think it's sort of an authenticity thing, really. I mean, there was a begrudging respect for Corbyn. Even people who were not fans of him in my areas of sort of white working class parts of the constituency, people were not supportive of Corbyn, but there was a begrudging respect.
They thought he was authentic. They thought he was principled.
He was principled. I mean, he'd not changed his politics since he was a child. And that was respected a bit. they don't know what Keir stands for. That's the problem we have. Farage, they know what he stands for. And that is the difference. And it's not a magic thing, right? It's about being authentic, in my view. I think Burnham's got it. I think Rayner's got it. I think Keir Starmer's not got it.
Well, I agree with you on the charisma side of it, but I'm slightly worried about policy. As I discussed with Richard Tice, I would humbly suggest, Carl Turner, that the country, until the next election, is better off with Starmer than Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband or Andy Burnham. The reason being that anyone that replaces Starmer can only do so by being more left-wing, because that's what the backbenchers and the party membership will be looking for. That's a problem, given the fact that the country's broke.
I think what the country is looking for is stability, and I think that's possible with Keir Starmer. I'm not calling for the PM to resign as the leader and Prime Minister. I'm hoping that there's not going to be a contest, but I think it's becoming more and more likely that there is as these results come in. But I want the party to settle down. I want us to take a long, hard think, find out where we're going and what we're about, and start to deliver, not just in policy terms, but in the sense that the backbenches are going to be listened to. We've been treated badly by this leadership. We've been treated, honestly, I feel, with contempt sometimes. Lots of us spoke out on the winter fuel. Many of us spoke out on the farmers' stuff, the inheritance tax. We thought that was a bad idea. Lots of policy areas, people spoke out in the PLP, and we were just ignored. Now the problem is coming and facing us directly. We've got a big problem. Keir Starmer's part of it, but he's not entirely to blame, not in my view.
Well, I mean, it's very charitable of you, considering that he's suspended the whip. You're now an independent MP because of your perfectly reasonable objections to the scrapping of some jury trials. Now, just a week ago, you spoke with great wisdom and sense on this very programme when you said that what the country needs is economic growth. You also said that the welfare bill is too high. It's higher now than the income tax take of the country, which is truly dysfunctional. The problem you've got, any replacement to Starmer won't achieve either of those things.
Exactly, and neither will Keir Starmer, because he's lost the authority of the parliamentary Labour
Party.
Well,
then we need a general election. If Starmer can't do it, and if his replacement can't do it, we need an election.
Well, if we had Keir Starmer leading the party in a way that was bringing the backbenches with him, those policy areas which need to be looked at very carefully, in my view, could be changed by Keir. But at the moment, he doesn't have the authority of the party. If he wanted a reshuffle, for example, Mark, I mean, some people say get rid of Ed Miliband. If he rings Ed Miliband this week and says, Ed, thanks very much, it's been an absolute pleasure and a treat, but I don't want you any longer, Ed Miliband could easily turn round and say, well, thank you very much, Prime Minister, but I've lost confidence. You can't govern like that. And that's the problem he has. Those areas of policy need looking at. The welfare benefits bill is bursting at the seams. We have to address those points, but the leader of the party has got to bring the PLP with him in order for the PLP to concede on points which are very difficult for them.
Based upon what's happening as we speak, with Reform UK gaining 355 seats so far and counting, with Labour anticipated to lose potentially 87% of their councillors, how does this translate into the next election, Carl? Labour won't be forming the next government, will they?
Absolutely not. I mean, if there was an election any time soon, it's good night Vianola for a lot of us. My seat's gone. Absolutely. There's no saving it, is the truth. And that's the same across the country.
Is it already gone, Carl? Have you already lost your seat, do you think?
Well, look, I'm an optimist, Mark. We've got 3 years before a general election. Things might turn around, but if it was any time soon, it's definitely gone. There's no question about that.
Would you consider defecting to Reform UK?
Mark, politics was sort of rammed down my throat. If I'd have come home at 16 and said to my trade unionist father, I'm gay, Dad, he'd have dined out on it for the next several years. If I'd have come home and said I'm a Tory, he'd have put an advert in the local rag saying I've had to divorce him. You know, that's the reality. I'm a socialist, Mark. You might not like, some people don't mind it. But I tell you, I couldn't do it. I'm not crossing to Reform or the Greens or the Lib Dems or the Tories, anybody else. I expect the Labour Party to welcome me back with open arms, but I'll not kowtow to them, begging and pleading and pretending that daft policies are a good idea when they're not.
Can a reset or a reshuffle save Starmer and rescue this administration? Have you got any hope that Starmer can turn this around?
I think a reshuffle right now is probably a bad idea, actually, because of the reasons I've said. Has he got the authority? I mean, who's he going to shift? What changes does he want to make? And is he going to be accused of looking round the room and blaming others again? Ollie Robbins, a perfectly good civil servant, in my view. He gave evidence to the Select Committee not too many weeks ago. He came across as a decent guy who was doing his job. Why did he get the sack? So people will rightly look at the Prime Minister and say, hang on a minute, isn't it about time you took responsibility? So I think a reshuffle right now is probably a bad idea. He'll be desperate to do one, I think, because he'll want yet another reset. But I think for now we have to calm it down to a frenzy. Let's see the results coming and then start from there. But start to speak to the backbenches. Find out what we want the Prime Minister and the leadership of the party to do, and hopefully we deliver it together. But if not, Mark, I'm afraid it's inevitable. The premiership of Keir Starmer is coming to an end fairly quickly.
Carl, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you for your reaction to the seismic results that are coming in thick and fast. Carl Turner, the MP for Hull East, formerly Labour, he's had the whip removed because of his objections to changes to jury trials in this country. Well, political history, folks, is playing out before our eyes. A turquoise tsunami washes across the country. Can that translate into a general election victory? And what about the Tories? I'll be asking Sir John Redwood next.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
DAB+ on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:26, a Talk Breakfast local election results special, and political history is playing out before our eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country. Reform UK inflicts seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, their leader Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. The Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are predicted to lose 87% of their councillors. Let's get reaction from one of the most experienced politicians in the country, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Lord John Redwood. Good morning, Lord Redwood.
Good morning, Mark.
What are your headlines this morning? What are you taking away from the results so far?
Well, I mean, the great news for the Conservatives is that Wandsworth and Westminster are back under Conservative control. They were always our flagship councils, which did proper Conservative things, good core services, great value for money, get rid of all the nonsenses and waste and have a much lower council tax. And that is exactly what we've got to demonstrate, so we can run those well again and show people that we do know how to run decent government, concentrate on what is important, cut out the nonsense and the waste, and give people a much better deal on taxes.
Yes, well, my heart broke to see the Tories lose Westminster City Council in 2022, a huge setback for what is a very economically productive area. That said, the mood music around your party is not great this morning. Why haven't the Conservative voters showed up?
Well, a lot of them have, and we need to win more back. That is quite obvious, and this is going to be a gradual process, regaining the trust, because as Kemi Badenoch has quite rightly said, we lost a lot of trust over migration, made a mess of that. We said the right things and didn't manage to execute the right policies. And we put taxes up a bit too much in the last couple of years, which was not very helpful. We could have done better on the spending side. A new Conservative government under new leadership from Kemi is going to change all that, and that message is getting across in places like Westminster and Wandsworth. It needs to get across in many more places around the country. And I look forward to working with those colleagues to show that we do know what we're doing again, and we can be trusted to run things well, whereas I think Reform already has problems in that it won a number of important council victories last year. It implied it was going to cut spending and get the council tax down, or at least prevent it going up. And everywhere they adopted the budgets of the outgoing councils, and they put the council tax up quite a lot. So they've got a lot to prove, and the more they win, the more people are going to say, well, hold on a minute, you aren't actually different. You're a bit like those Lib Dems and Labour you've been replacing because you're spending too much and putting the tax up too much.
Lord Redwood, with me in the studio is the political broadcaster Benedict Spence.
It's interesting sort of hearing the response to all this, because undoubtedly Kemi Badenoch is doing a pretty good job at detoxifying the party, given that where they were even a couple of months ago. But isn't the problem here that the Conservatives are just sort of having to sit and wait for, to use that Boris Johnson expression, for the bull to come loose at the back of the scrum? Isn't the problem here that the Conservatives are a little bit too passive? They've been forced into a position now where they're having to wait for the moment at which Reform drops the ball in a particularly bad way to inherit that, sort of mantle on the right. Isn't that a bit of a problem? Because it's actually sort of leaving their own destiny in the hands of another political party in many ways.
Well, no political party controls their own destiny to any great extent. The electorate are all powerful, and the electorate have their ways. And sometimes the party just upsets too many voters and lets people down in too big a way, and then they get drummed out. And then there's a task for rebuilding. And that was something it took Labour 14 years to do. They gained just enough trust to win a lot of seats, but not a lot of votes. They're now being slaughtered because they haven't lived up to their rather limited promises and done lots of things people didn't want them to do. The Conservatives are getting over having particularly made a mess of immigration and illegal migrants arriving across the Channel. And that is going to take time. But I think when you get to a general election, which is probably 3 years away, why would Labour want to slaughter more of its political office holders earlier than they need to? And so I think by then there will be a serious dialogue between the 5 or 6 parties now contesting power over who will stop the small boats, over who will control migration properly, over above all who will have an economic policy that can reverse the disasters of this government with high tax and no growth and unemployment rising. And I think when it comes to the economic offer, the polling already shows the Conservatives ahead of the other parties.
But again, this is a problem because the perception is, I think, over the last sort of 14 years, that the reason why the Conservatives lost, sort of as you put it, is that they were sort of not tough enough on certain things. But ultimately, I think the perception is, especially in the sort of the latter stages under Rishi Sunak, that the Conservatives were just sort of waiting for the inevitable, that they were being passive. And you're sort of talking about what you were saying there, just basically going, it's almost a fait accompli, the public have decided they don't like us, and we deserve a period in opposition. And it was partly because, rather than being proactive, they were just sort of letting things happen, letting things slide. It's a very different kind of unpopularity to what Labour have got, which is that the perception actually is that Labour has simply lied to the electorate. They said they wouldn't put taxes up. They have put taxes up. They said that they would stop the boats. They haven't stopped the boats. Whereas, I think that therein lies the problem, which is that actually the Conservatives were just sort of seen as sitting there waiting for things to happen. In much the same way now as I think the perception is they are sitting waiting for reform to fail. The very least, reform have an element of dynamism to them. People might not necessarily like what they have to say, but there is a sort of a forward-thinking nature. There is sort of an activity to them. You might even say, if you were to sort of co-opt the word, a progressive element to how it is that they get on the front foot about politics, that Labour certainly doesn't have, and the Conservatives don't have either. And I just worry, is that in fact going to be the thing that actually keeps those two established parties, once Labour does lose power, and I think that it probably will, but that could end up keeping them out, is not necessarily that Reform have got all the answers, but they at least try to get out on the front foot in a way that the Tories, and to a degree Labour, just don't seem able to do.
Well, I agree with you about Rishi Sunak, who literally gave up, I think, much sooner than he should have done. I mean, I had thought he was going along with ideas I was giving him, that we could have had some mortgage rate cuts in the second half of the year before the general election if we delayed it, and we could have had another mini budget with actually getting taxes down further with some matching public expenditure reductions, because there was wasteful and unnecessary expenditure going on. I thought he went along with that, and that was why I didn't fight the last election, because I felt just giving up like that and having done quite a few socialist things in the last couple of years meant that I couldn't defend that record. I'm now very proud to support Kemi, because she is offering a really good Conservative alternative, and that's where I disagree with you. I think there is an energy and a vitality about Kemi spreading to the rest of the Conservative Party, and it's called belief, and we've got belief in things again. And we actually believe that lower taxes produce growth, and Labour's high taxes are ruinous. We believe that less regulation and regulation of the right kind gets more young people into jobs, whereas Labour's regulation is actually getting young people out of jobs, excluding them from the workforce. So we believe that doing what Labour is doing on taxation of the rich and wealthy drives people away and makes the country poorer rather than being a morally good idea. So when you've then got Conservative beliefs with a coherent economic story, then you are going to win back trust. So I'm very positive about Kemi and her leadership. I think it's transformational. And that's why I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we can easily be the lead party going into the general election.
Lord John Redwood, always a great privilege to have you on the programme. Look forward to catching up soon. My thanks to John Redwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, who backs Kemi all the way. The issue that you've got is, at the moment, the mood music around the Tories' performance at the local elections is very negative indeed. In fact, they've lost 142 seats so far. It's likely to be a very tough day at the office for the leader of the Conservatives. The Greens have made gains, 26 at the moment. The Lib Dems treading water, plus 35. Reform up 356. And Labour anticipated to lose 87% of their councillors. More reaction next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk Breakfast. It is 7:38, and political history is playing out before our very eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country as Reform UK inflict seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Reform are currently up 356 seats, Labour down 248, with an anticipated 87% of Labour councillors expected to lose their seats in the hours ahead. The Lib Dems currently up 35, arguably treading water. Let's get reaction from a good friend of the show and a good friend of mine. I'm delighted to welcome Christine Jardine, who is, of course, a Liberal Democrat MP. Good morning, Christine.
Good morning, Mark.
Thanks so much for joining us. What's your appraisal of the headlines so far?
I think it's been a bad night for Labour. It's also been a bad night for the Conservatives. Both of the, if you like, the traditional duopoly are finding life difficult at the moment. They certainly need to have a bit of a rethink. We, on the other hand, we're pleased. This is the 8th round of council elections in a row where we've made gains. Fantastic results in Stockport. Fantastic results up and down the country. We're ahead in seats. You said you're treading water. I think that we're treading water. I think that's a wee bit unkind, Mark. This is, as I say, the 8th round in a row where we have increased our number of councillors. It's, it backs up the success that we had in the general election. And as the largest third party in history, I think there's a lot positive for the Liberal Democrats.
Do you think the Lib Dems are a protest vote, Christine? And if so, who for?
No, we're certainly not a protest vote. We're a serious party of government. We've been in the government in the last 20 years. We've been in the government in Scotland. We're in local government up and down the country. We're a serious party which looks after its communities, which works for our communities. And it's always been said of us, where a Liberal Democrat gets elected, it then becomes difficult to get rid of us because we work so hard for our communities. We're a serious party. It's not about protest. We want to get away from the divisive politics in this country. We worry very much that what's happening at the moment is that we've got populism taking root in this country, and that's not the right way ahead. What we want to see are good community-based policies. We want to see rejection of the sort of Trumpism that we're hearing from Nigel Farage and the sort of left-wing populism that we're hearing from the Greens. We want good, solid government. We want to keep us out of the Trump's war. We want action on the economy. We're not a party of protest, haven't been for many years.
What do you mean, though, Christine, by populist politics? And what do you mean by Farage making Trumpian noises?
Well, when I say populist, what I mean is, it's all very well to say, this would be a great thing to do, whatever it is. But then when it comes, to scrutiny, you see that it doesn't actually work. The money isn't there, that it's just, saying something which will be popular to get people on side and then let them down. And that's what I mean by populism. And I don't think that what we're hearing from the Green Party is sustainable. I don't think what we're hearing from the Reform Party is sustainable. I worry a lot about what Nigel Farage says, that it sounds very like the sort of policies we're hearing from Donald Trump in America. And that is why I have always been, a liberal. I'm liberally minded. And I think that what we are seeing in this country is people want government that they can rely on. They don't want empty promises. They've had too much of that.
Well, it's interesting. You're so right about political hot air and over-promising and under-delivering. We've seen that from Labour. We've seen that from the Tories. I'll give you this, Christine, that I think that the Lib Dems did good things in partnership with the Tories in the coalition years, particularly in getting that deficit down after the global financial crisis. Figures like Vince Cable, I think, can be proud of their record in office. But if you look at the so-called populism of Reform UK, what are they proposing? So they'll scrap the net zero target, something that will be welcomed by the left-wing unions and working-class communities who rely on industry. There is the idea of scrapping or exiting the ECHR, looking again at the Refugee Convention and the Human Rights Act so we can stop illegal immigration, which is costing the country billions. That's not populism. That's just policies people want.
No, I don't agree. I think that, you know, if you talk to young people in this country, one of the biggest things they're worried about for the future is the climate and what's going to happen with, you know, climate change.
The UK can do nothing about the climate.
Well, hang on a second. The UK can. We can make a contribution. And we are in the middle of a just transition from the North Sea to sustainable energy, to renewable energy. Now, that has to be managed and managed properly. And the danger is that if we don't do it, then we continue to damage the planet. And there's another reason we have to do it, which is, you know, we now see that we would become, we see what is happening with the Gulf War, that we're being not held to ransom, but that our energy prices are going through the roof because of foreign activity. Now, that is not what we want, and that is not
sure, but that long predates Iran.
We need a sustainable, climate-friendly energy policy. We need an industrial policy. Yes, that's what the Labour government, I feel, needs to be looking soon, is at an industrial policy for the future. But the two are not incompatible. And this is where I disagree vehemently with reform. Economic sustainability and climate sustainability are not incompatible, and we need to move towards a more sustainable energy, and that is what we are doing
now,
in this country.
Christine, you and I, we agree on so many things, and I have voted Lib Dem in the past,
sure.
And I'm more than happy to vote Lib Dem again in the future. What I always liked about the Lib Dems is that they were perhaps, you know, economically on the left, but business friendly, which I thought was a sweet spot for the party. Let's hope that's still the case. But if you look at, for example, policies like net zero, you know, it is impacting those industrial heartlands, and it's interesting that the left-wing trade unions are against that policy. It's simply something the country can't afford. And whilst China are building coal-fired power stations for fun, whilst India are polluting, I'm all for windmills and for green renewables, and of course we've got lots of them. But Germany is a case in point that if you go all in with net zero, you're going to lose your economic output.
No, I don't agree. I think that what we have to do in this country is have an economic policy and an energy policy that's secure for us.
Germany is a warning to the world. They're all in with renewables, and their economy is going down the toilet because energy prices are so high.
Let's look at our economy. Let's look at Germany is not the only country in the world that has gone down a more sustainable route. Denmark's done quite well out of it. What we are looking at in this country now is a situation where recently more than 50% of our energy at times has been produced from renewable sources. We have vast renewable sources in this country, particularly in Scotland, where tidal energy is something which we could be investigating now. The main thing for me, there are two things about this, but one of the main things for me is that it gives us economic security. It gives us energy security. If our energy sources are all produced at home, that gets us out of the situation where we can be held ransom or, you know, be in economic thrall to oil companies, to foreign companies, foreign countries with oil and gas like we are at the moment because of the problem in the Strait of Hormuz, because of the war in Iran.
Okay, well,
in the 1970s, when we were producing oil, we found ourselves in great difficulties at sometimes because OPEC put up the price of oil, and that is something we want to get away from, and that is one of the benefits.
Okay.
Not the only benefit, but it's one of the benefits of a more sustainable, home-produced, renewable energy system.
Christine, stay with us if you can. We know you're on a tight schedule. I'll bring you some breaking news, which is the Conservatives have lost control of Hampshire County Council, which now falls into no overall control. The Tories went into yesterday's election with a majority of 34. It doesn't look great for the Tories this morning, or Labour in particular. Last question to you, Christine, from Benedict Spence, political broadcaster.
We went off at a bit of a tangent there about energy, because actually the thing that's driving, in particular, the rise of reform is not energy policy. That's the secondary thing. It's immigration. Now, you put it in these terms that sort of Nigel Farage uses quite Trumpian populist language when it comes to immigration. But is it not the case that for decades now, at every opportunity that they have been asked, the British electorate have said they want less immigration, not more. They want tough action on illegal immigration, not simply a situation where governments sit there and go, we can't do anything. what is actually populist or indeed negative about a party actually coming along and saying, we will do something to address this, rather than successive Labour, Conservative, and indeed, you have to say, part of the coalition Lib Dems, governments promising one thing and not delivering it. What's wrong with that?
You have to make a difference between people who come to this country as legally in the first place, as asylum seekers and refugees.
I did, and let's be clear, the public have voted for less of both.
Yeah, if I could just finish though, you need to make that distinction, because the public, while they might, none of us like seeing the small boats crossing the channel. What I'm finding on the doors is that the public recognise that we have a skill shortage in this country, that we have an employment gap, and that there are areas of this country and there are sectors in our economy which need legal immigration. And the problem that we have is that the asylum system, the refugee system, the immigration system in general is a mess because the Conservatives allowed it to be a mess. We have huge waiting lists. We have all sorts of problems. In terms of the people who are coming to this country, across the channel and through illegal routes. Now, what we want to see is safe legal routes for genuine asylum seekers. We want to see sort of monitoring closer to where people are coming from, so that if they are wanting to come here legally or they have an asylum claim, it can be done closer to where they come from, and that we crack down on the gangs which are making money. We have a proper crackdown on that now, and Nightingale centres for people who come to this country. Now, that is how we will break the illegal problem that we have in this country.
Christine, always a treat to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your valuable time. My thanks to Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat MP. Your reaction? Well, an historic morning. A turquoise tsunami washes across the country. Could that translate into a general election victory for Nigel Farage? That's next.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Oh.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You're listening to Talk Breakfast. It is a local election results special, and breaking this morning, a political story today, a historic one as well. History is playing out before our eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country as Reform UK inflicts seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has said now we can win the general election. Meanwhile, the Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are now predicted to lose 87% of their councillors. And what about the Tories? Well, let's have a look now at a new report from the Henry Jackson Society that warns more than 170 sectarian-style candidates could be elected across 31 councils. Let's get reaction. I'm delighted to welcome let's have a look at this. Let's get all my ducks in a row. The research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, Emma Schubart. Hello, Emma.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show. So potentially 170 sectarian-style candidates. What would they be? Could you describe those types of candidates for us?
Sure. So a Muslim sectarian candidate is a very specific type of candidate. This is an individual who campaigns almost exclusively on Muslim transnational grievances, Muslim communal issues. That often looks like in practice campaigning on things like Gaza or Kashmir or even Tehran more recently. And the reason why that's so important in local elections is because local councils have absolutely no power over what happens in those parts of the world. So campaigning on those issues and electing an individual who campaigns on those issues is a really big problem for democratic accountability, because it further separates the link between what your councillor can and cannot do for you and why you're voting for them.
And what are the implications for our country and our democracy, Emma, if we see a scaling up of sectarian politics?
Well, as a few examples, a number of the candidates that we have identified in that over nearly 200 individual long list have explicitly called for Muslims to resist integration with non-Muslims in the UK. We have seen really worrying signs of extreme anti-Semitism within these candidates. I believe around 30 are being probed right now within the Green Party alone for anti-Semitism. We know 2 individuals within the Green Party were actually arrested a few days ago for alleged anti-Semitism. So none of this is very good. I mean, all of this, the Muslim sectarian politics does is it further separates those communities from the British body politic, discourages integration, and as I mentioned earlier, it corrodes democratic accountability between the electorate and their councillors.
Are these independent pro-Gaza sectarian politicians and their agenda, is it at odds with the British way of life?
Well, first of all, I want to put a little bit of a point on that. The Muslim sectarian candidates that we have identified include independent candidates, individuals running on independent slates, as well as there are some Green Party members represented in there. There's some Your Party candidates represented, and Workers' Party candidates and Aspire. That's the party that exists solely in Tower Hamlets. And in terms of what does this spell for the UK, I think this is foreshadowing what could happen at the national level. Council elections are seen to be one of the best signals we have of what will happen down the line. And if we see the sort of Muslim sectarian sweep that we're expecting to see, we're still waiting for the results to come in. It's not final yet by any means. Then I think we should expect to see something very similar on the national level.
So if you scaled up this sectarian support, what might the country look like in the years ahead?
Well, it would certainly look like a much more ununited and severely divided nation, in my opinion. I think
illiberalism, anti-Semitism, people living in parallel communities, religion coming first ahead of country.
Religion coming first ahead of country, and transnational grievance politics coming ahead of country. I mean, again, there's absolutely nothing your counselor can do about whatever happens in Gaza. It doesn't matter what you think about what should happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to fix your potholes. So it's a huge problem.
Do these politicians, these sectarian politicians, do they care about potholes or NHS waiting lists?
Well, you certainly have to ask them. In the research that we've conducted, it seems that seems to be secondary.
It's not their focus, is it?
No, I mean, it seems to be secondary to everything else that they're running on. One thing that we've seen very frequently is that there's a sort of a loyalty test that is required of the electorate by these Muslim sectarian candidates. It's symbolic. And it has almost nothing to do with ability to govern. It's ability to signal allegiance to a cause.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us. An important conversation and arguably a worrying one. My thanks to Emma Schubart, who is a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. If you're just joining us, an historic morning. Yes, folks, a turquoise tsunami washes across the country as Reform UK inflict seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. Meanwhile, the Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are predicted to lose 87% of their councillors. If we have a look at the results so far, it is truly extraordinary. It is truly unprecedented, with Reform UK up 374 seats, Labour down 253, more to come.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning, 2 minutes past 8. This is Talk Breakfast and Starmer's toast. Breaking this morning, political history is playing out before our very eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country as Reform UK do better than expected, inflicting seismic damage on Labour and the Conservatives. Speaking a few moments ago, their leader Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. Meanwhile, the Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are predicted to lose 87% of their councillors. And as the BBC Wildlife presenter David Attenborough turns 100, do the lesser-spotted Tories face extinction? So what does this reform rampage mean for Nigel Farage and his insurgent army? Can they win power? Are they ready for it? And what does the rise of the Green mean for the political left in this country? Is the idea of right and left now dead? Is the two-party politics no more? Is the uniparty a thing of the past? And the most immediate question is the one facing Sir Keir Starmer. Should he stay or should he go? We'll bring the results as they come in with reaction from the biggest names in politics and journalism. But what do you think? Can Reform's success translate into victory at the next election? And Starmer, should he stay or should he go? My phone number is 03444991000. Tommy's taking your calls. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note and, as the saying goes, let's talk. So far as the picture stands, we have Reform UK on 376 seats. Labour down 246. The Conservatives down 157. The Lib Dems treading water plus 37 and the Greens plus 26. Now, we expect Labour to shore up slightly once some of the bigger cities come in. But it's all about Reform UK, who are sweeping the board across the country. And why would that be? Let's ask Lord Robert Hayward, Tory peer and pollster and political analyst. We're also joined in the studio by Benedict Spence, broadcaster and political commentator. Benedict, we'll get to Starmer's future in a moment, but today it's all about Nigel Paul Farage.
It is. It's the seismic moment that everybody was anticipating, possibly might even turn out to be even better. The proof, though, that the support does exist out there in the country for reform. It's not simply a flash in the pan, and that actually there is the groundswell both of support for reform and, I think, dissatisfaction with Labour that this could be, if it were replicated at a national level, enough to get them over the line. I do also think, though, that given the size of Reform's victory, this may crystallise some attitudes on the left, may focus some minds about how it is that they will act to stop Reform from forming a government in a few years' time, because I think people need to remember left-wing parties would far rather do everything they could to keep a Reform government out than actively work to get a majority themselves.
6 minutes past 8, and breaking news, the Conservatives have retained control of Kensington and Chelsea, a council they've controlled since its creation in '64, and they've got the city of Westminster back as well. But overall, quite a difficult picture for the Conservatives. So let's have a look at the winners and losers in the company of Tory peer, pollster and political analyst, Lord Robert Hayward. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning.
Is Reform's performance so far better than expected?
Yes, it is. It's slightly better than expected. It's probably down on vote share from last year, but overall a good result for them, no question about it.
What my audience want to know, Robert, is whether this translates into a general election victory.
I laugh because I always respond by saying I make predictions in relation to any election, whether it's local or national, about 7 days to 10 days before it takes place. I'm certainly not going to make a prediction 3 years out from a general election, particularly, as I say, because 2025 Reform, I think, did better than they have done this year. So are they tapering downwards? Don't know. We have a first past the post system, which rewards people who do best, even if it's marginally better. They've had great victories.
Robert, let me make life a bit easier for you. And I understand that you only predict 7 to 10 days out, which is why you are such a respected pollster. So in that case, who wins if there's an election in 7 to 10 days' time?
Reform, no question about it.
Really?
Having said that, and there is one key qualification, a lot of the polls indicate that they're willing to support Reform for local elections and things that they deem less important. The Conservatives are in the lead on the economy in comparison with all parties at the moment. So probably Reform, but a full election campaign would be fought before we actually got to the vote.
Robert, with me in the studio is the respected political broadcaster Benedict Spence. Benedict, your thoughts?
I mean, obviously now we're having to sort of act within this caveat of it's a long way away from a general election, but hypothetically, if it were in 7 to 10 days' time, obviously you'd say, Reform would win as things currently stand, but what price would you put on the possibility of, at this hypothetical 7-day time general election, a coalition, not a deliberate coalition, but the value of tactical voting amongst left-wing parties? Could we see a situation, is it likely that we see a situation where hatred or loathing or suspicion of Reform amongst Labour, the SNP, the Greens actually crystallises into more tactical voting to keep Reform out rather than any attempt to form a government themselves?
One of the striking things about these local elections has been that this has been a local election of bar charts. Historically, the Liberal Democrats produced bar charts. Every party has produced bar charts this time to show that they're in a better position to challenge Reform, to stop the Greens, to defeat Labour. And we would see that messaging over and over again. We are in such a fluid state in this country at the moment in terms of overall politics that even my 7 to 10 day rule is at risk, because I almost find myself saying, well, actually, what might happen tomorrow? And the answer is not absolutely sure.
I mean, Robert, you will tell us as an experienced pollster and a political heavyweight that we've always had a degree of tactical voting. Is there a possibility that that could be ramped up and be more organised at the next general election? Is it possible that an unwritten left-wing coalition could stop Farage?
Oh, it's the reason I say about the bar charts, because people have been parties have been trying to put themselves in a position where they are the prime party to fill in the blank. As I say, stop reform, stop Greens, get rid of Keir Starmer.
Can it work, or is tactical voting overstated as a tactic?
It's the first election that I've ever been witnessing where tactical voting, no question, it has worked quite heavily in all sorts of different directions. I think it may become, we are now in the world of multi-party politics. If you're in the world of multi-party politics, you're in the world of tactical voting. And I think we'll see it in Wales today, for example, with people voting Plaid to stop reform to some extent, for example. So we are in a different world. Tactical voting is part of our current politics, and it does work in part.
If the left-wing parties, Robert, work together at the next general election, does that mean that the Tories and Reform are going to have to stop taking lumps out of each other?
I think the likelihood is that, depending on who's leader of the Labour Party, for example, but I'm not convinced that the left wing will be able to coalesce in one form or another and operate on a tactical coalition. So I'm not sure that the Tories and Reform will either. The interesting thing is, for example, at the moment, and I said, yes, Reform would win an election tomorrow, but actually the least unpopular party leader at the moment is Kemi Badenoch. So do you say, well, we want reform policies with Kemi leading it? Interesting possibility.
That's interesting. Benedict?
I mean, it's something else that's sort of interesting, I suppose, is we talk about as sort of Kemi sort of gradually improves. And again, this is not something that you're going to be able to sort of extrapolate 3 years out. But what price also we get to a position where, as Kemi Badenoch continues on her trajectory, very slowly improving her image and maybe rehabilitating part of the Tory image, are they able to eat into that reform vote? But on the other side, I know it's a fraction, it's a tiny sort of movement right now. How much in sort of key areas could you see something like, for instance, Rupert Lowe's insurgent group, I forget what it's called, Restore? Something like that.
Restore UK.
Yeah, something like that. Could you also see them in sort of very marginal seats? Obviously, nobody's expecting them to win anything, but again, eating into that sort of reform lead. Obviously, impossible for you to judge this far out, but is there any sort of sign of a rise for both the Conservatives and Restore to a degree that over time could lead to that sort of outcome?
Anything is possible, and we will have election results with Restore fighting in Yarmouth today. So Restore showed their weakness by their inability to field candidates in other parts of the country, but it will be an interesting local test for what might be a national option at a later point. We are in one of the most fascinating periods of British politics because it's so confused. And there's no certainty about what how the electorate will respond to any one set of political events.
Briefly, Robert, we have a brand new party in Reform UK whose leader, Nigel Farage, only took the top job after being convinced by his colleagues a few months before the 2024 general election. And here they are with 380 seats. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? Have you ever witnessed anything like this in your lifetime as a political heavyweight and pollster?
Flattery, thank you. The answer is yes, and it's called UKIP. Only a few years ago, they surged, and then
there's a theme emerging here, isn't there?
There is, I'm afraid, and there's no question that I sat and answered similar questions in relation to UKIP and their great success in 2014.
Robert, we love having you on the show. I look forward to hearing your expertise in the near future. My deep thanks to Lord Robert Hayward, Tory peer pollster and political analyst. It's all about your feedback. Starmer, should he stay or should he go? And can Nigel Farage do the double and win the general election? Here's a voice note from lovely Laura.
Morning, Mark. Laura in Wiltshire. Great news so far this morning. Feeling slightly irritated by Benedict, sorry to say, in that he keeps on playing this down. Oh, but it doesn't mean it'll go right. And if it does go right for reform, they might not honour what they've said they'll do. But they're not the Tories and they're not Labour. And that's why people are voting for them. And he just mentioned that Brexit didn't go the way we wanted to because it wasn't enacted. Absolutely right. Nigel got Brexit to happen. And guess what? Boris and his crew messed it up.
There you go. That's you told.
Tell me, who are the people that are affecting to reform en masse, the sort of senior leadership? Are they former Conservative MPs by any chance?
Only the carefully selected ones.
Almost as if they're a political party made up of politicians. Listen, I would like it to be the case that reform, if they do get in, that they do not act like a traditional political party. But the problem with politics is it tends to attract politicians. And that's, that's all I have to say. We have to wait and see. But I simply wouldn't want to hang my coat up and say, absolutely, reform is going to be different. Please, let us not make the mistake of the past and believe that it's all going to be sunlit uplands. Let's wait until a party actually follows through on its promises first before we actually give them their flowers.
Benedict, no better man to help us react to the big political story of the day. Thank you so much for joining us, and I cannot wait for your return to the studio. The inestimable Benedict Spence, broadcaster and political commentator. Breaking this morning, the Tories have retained control of Kensington and Chelsea Council. They've controlled that council since its creation in 1964. But it's thin gruel for the Tories. Yes, they've hung on to posh Kensington and Chelsea. They've regained the city of Westminster, but they're down 161. So are the Tories toast? What about Starmer? Should he stay? Should he go? And Nigel Farage, can he now win the next general election? 8:17, this is Talk Breakfast.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss miss a moment of The Crown in crisis, subscribe to The Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, breaking this morning on Talk Breakfast, political history is playing out before our eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country, as Reform UK inflicts seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Speaking just moments ago, their leader Nigel Farage has said now we can win the general election. Meanwhile, the Greens inflict further damage on Labour as Starmer's party are anticipated to lose 87% of their councillors. You heard me right. At the moment, Reform UK are up 379, Tories down 161, Labour down 253. The Lib Dems treading water at plus 36, and the Greens on the march plus 27, expected to do well in our metropolitan areas. So that's what's happening at the moment. Nigel Farage has boasted of an historic shift in politics, saying Reform is on track to win the election and that left and right is no more and the Uniparty has gone. The Conservatives have lost control of Hampshire County Council, which now falls into no overall control, and Reform UK gain their first council, Newcastle-under-Lyme, which is, of course, in the Midlands. The Conservatives have won back control of Westminster City Council. What is the picture like for the Tories? Who better to ask than a legend of the party, former Conservative government minister, and one of the men that got Brexit done, Steve Baker. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
Well, it's a decent legacy. It's good to have you on the programme. How do you think the picture looks for the Tories? I know it's early days, but what's the mood music?
Well, I don't think it's that bad for the Conservatives, because really the Conservative story is overwhelmed by the Labour Party taking a complete drubbing. I mean, it's Starmageddon as this great realignment of British politics continues, and voters from the Labour Party appear to be either voting Reform if they're people rooted in place, or if they're kind of internationalists, if they're the nowheres, they're voting Green or Lib Dem. And that's giving Labour an absolute thrashing. So I mean, as James Cleverly has been out telling people, it's not a good night for the Conservative Party. It's always sad to lose Conservative councillors, but I think, Kemi will be secure after this, with Robert Jenrick having defected. I think, we were expecting a year ago that Kemi Badenoch would be in trouble after these elections. I don't think that will be the case. The real focus will be on Keir Starmer.
Kemi's great, isn't she? The party is the problem.
Kemi is very good. Yes, I am a fan of Kemi's. She's great. But, I don't know, the party's a problem. The party's had the difficulty of being in power for 14 years, including coalition, the Brexit years, the pandemic. These are all excuses. I can feel your listeners sighing, but, it is what it is.
But it's those dusty One Nation Tories that you battled with during COVID.
Well, Mark, this is part of the business of the family of politics. The Tory party's an amalgam.
The Adams family.
Yeah, maybe. It's got libertarians like me. It's got One Nation centrist dad conservatives for whom the world works very well and they don't want to change too much. Yeah. It's always had communitarian nationalists like Danny Kruger who's gone to Reform. But the big problem is the centrist dad approach is over. What is happening across the world with Trump, with Maloney, in India, in China, is a big reorientation of politics towards the main axis being identity and culture. Are you a communitarian rooted in place? Are you, feeling solidarity with your nation state? Or are you an internationalist, very cosmopolitan? And this new axis of politics is completely upending the old party system, which leaves me surprising myself by saying I think your summary of what Nigel Farage said is right. The Uniparty, as it has been, is over. He really might win the next election.
Well, we have breaking news, Steve. The Prime Minister has broken his silence after a torrid set of results, which are likely to get worse as the day goes on. The Prime Minister has said the following: tough days like this don't weaken my resolve to deliver the change that I promised. They strengthen my resolve to do so. He admitted there is no sugarcoating these results. We've lost brilliant Labour representatives across the country. Well, you know as well as I do, reading between the lines there, Steve, the Prime Minister is going nowhere.
Well, Mark, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, prime ministers love power. Finally, they've made it. They're in Downing Street. The entire machinery of the state is theirs. If they want to nip along to MI5 or MI6 and ask any question they like, they can. They'll get an answer. You know, they can swan around with close protection everywhere. They're important. They can go to international summits where he seems quite comfortable. You know, they love being in Downing Street. And of course, he will cling on to the bitterest end. And I think that's something Labour MPs will have to face up to if they want a change of Prime Minister, which may or may not be a good idea from their point of view, probably is. I think he's widely hated. But if they want to remove him, they'll have to actually get on and do it. They can't just hope he'll go, because he won't. He'll stay.
Steve, you are a very consistent, red-blooded Conservative. Why do you think your party was infected with the virus of leftist progressivism? I can give you some examples. Signing up to net zero, which was economically illiterate and misguided. The cult of welfarism, in which now the size of the welfare budget is higher than the income tax take. Wokery in our public institutions, high immigration and the boat crisis. Why did this happen to your great party?
Well, that's a very important question. I mean, I'm afraid Jacob Rees-Mogg answered some of this when he came on my Fighting for a Free Future podcast. He made the point that, unfortunately, as politicians, you have to give the electorate what they appear to want in the polls in order to win. And with Boris, that's what Jacob argues is went on with Boris and net zero. I mean, Theresa May, of course, introduced it, but the world's been going down this really quite mad path of net zero. I opposed it. I didn't divide the House of Commons. Big problem when it went through the Commons. It was in the midst of the Brexit drama. If we had divided the Commons, forced a vote, I'm afraid it would have only been Eurosceptics who voted against. We would have lost. So there was no point making that problem worse. So I'm afraid it went through. But yeah, I'm afraid the Tory party likes to do what is relatively easy. It likes to stick with the status quo. It likes to go with the consensus. I'm afraid that's what happened. But it's increasingly clear that, I don't like to say it, but the sorts of messages I've been saying since 2010 turn out right. We must cut spending. We must secure borders. We must be an independent sovereign country. And, you know, Nigel Farage now faces the challenge that he's likely to be the next Prime Minister, and he will need to deliver those things.
Steve, you've been right about everything since day one. You pushed for Brexit, which even in its lukewarm current state is still far better than being a member of the European Union, which is a dying economic bloc, paying 20 billion quid a year for the great privilege of membership. So we're out, and that's a positive legacy. I suspect a future administration will capitalise on Brexit. There's no way we're going back in. So you got behind Brexit. You also, as a government minister, got the Brexit deal completed very successfully. You've pushed back on the size of the welfare state, net zero, and of course you were a vocal opponent of the COVID lockdowns, which you took the view would do more harm than good. Well, that view has aged very well. And I think COVID is a good example of how the Tories lost their way. And it's now Reform who have occupied that Conservative space.
It does look like that, Mark, doesn't it? I mean, first of all, thank you for being so kind. If only everyone agreed with you. A couple of things to unpack there. Reform are getting votes for the Labour Party. I mean, look at Hartlepool. Reform swept the board. So, you know, Reform will have a very interesting new challenge to unite their electoral coalition when many of those voters come from the Labour tradition. The second thing on the EU, and this is to look ahead, this is a really, really important point, and I hope EU figures listen. Nigel Farage is highly likely to be the next Prime Minister with a substantial majority. There is absolutely no way he will be able to tolerate Keir Starmer's subordination to EU law. And when Nigel, or indeed Kemi, but most likely Nigel, pulls out of fisheries, the way the deal is constructed to suit the French, that will collapse most economic cooperation. That will lead us back to no deal. The EU needs to get really serious about what's going to happen next, because if they give Keir Starmer the UK subordinated to EU law, I'm afraid that will lead us to no deal in a few years, and it will get entrenched and it will do no one any good. Better to change course now, recognising that this Prime Minister is an absolute lame duck.
Let's take a voice note if we can, Steve, whilst I have you, from Kevin. Take a listen to this.
Good morning, Mark. Wonderful morning this morning, seeing Reform sweeping the board in local elections. Certainly people on Talk all knew this was going to happen. I think the elites all thought it were an aberration. Certainly the mainstream media didn't want to believe it. And now they're having to interview Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick. But I have to say, watching one or two interviews this morning, the whole tone is negative from the mainstream media. They seem to be treating it as an aberration, oh, it'll not last, etc., etc. Well, I hope they keep these views because the next election will be even bigger than this. So I'm in a really upbeat mood this morning. I'm over the moon that Reform are doing well. Great show, Mark. Carry on the good work.
Steve, you have disgruntled Conservatives and disgruntled Labour voters who are backing Reform UK. Can you understand why they're so happy this morning?
Yeah, of course I can. And I listened to him with great sympathy there. You know, good on him. He's doing what he believes is right and it's working. You know, the election, Nigel Farage set out to smash the Conservative Party. He's made great inroads in doing that. And now he's smashing the Labour Party. I mean, if you're a Reform supporter, this is an absolutely terrific day of rejoicing. I don't want to be negative in that context, but I'm afraid the problem I've got is I know the characters involved too well, and I'm just not very optimistic that they'll form a successful government after the next election. But, I want to be wrong about that.
Well, that's fascinating. What are your concerns about Mr. Farage's character, Steve?
Well, the problem is this, that it's long been said that one campaigns in poetry and governs in prose. The business of governing is not like the business of winning power. And Nigel's really exceptionally accomplished at campaigning, and no one doubts that. The big challenge is if he goes straight into number 10, having never been a UK minister. I mean, it has to be said he doesn't often, his voting record is not at the top of the rankings in the House of Commons. But if he goes straight in as Prime Minister with an enormous bunch of brand new MPs, some of whom will have to go straight into the cabinet as brand new MPs, it's just very difficult to see how he will have the enormous change of gear necessary to get that team to cohere together and deliver the radical change which people will then be expecting. Because I think, make no mistake, if Labour fell on their faces partly because change didn't come quick enough as Labour promised, well, I hope Nigel and indeed Danny Kruger, who's got the principal responsibility, I think, for bringing the experience of government to bear for Reform, they need to really make sure that Reform do not fall flat on their faces when they get into power. And, actually, I wish them well because I want the best interests of this country to be served. If Nigel Farage ends up being the person to do it, well, good on him. But please don't fall flat on your face, Nigel, because what will come after you if you do? And I really don't know.
Well, I take your point about experience, which is why Mr. Farage would argue he's welcomed one or two prominent ex-Conservatives into the fold. But do you have a concern about Mr. Farage's temperament and makeup as a politician? Is he a diva? Is it a one-man band? Does that concern you?
Well, he certainly is the dominant character, but that as such doesn't concern me. For a long time, the UK system has ended up kind of devolving to being a presidential system. It really matters who the Prime Minister is. The whole civil service really cares who the Prime Minister is. And civil servants will deliver the Prime Minister's will. So it's actually very good that he's a strong character. And I certainly don't want to be personally attacking Nigel Farage. The issue is whether he personally can change gear from campaigning to governing, whether he'll have the right support around him. Richard Tice will bear a very significant burden if he's in government. That's the really big challenge. Can they get through the dreary business of a lot of cross-government committees where the real work of bringing change is done? And that is a really big question now in the context of these local election results.
And, of course, the left-wing blob, which thwarted the will of the last Conservative government, the left-wing blob that convinced Boris Johnson we needed 1 million people to come into the country in a year, the same left-wing blob that forced the hand of the Prime Minister during COVID to have 3 ruinous national lockdowns.
Well, yes, and what this demands is exceptional talent from ministers and members of parliament. It means they need to really look at the detail and have their own ideas about how things should be done. So, for example, during COVID, I worked with Professor Roger Coppell, a great friend of mine, who's written a book called Expert Failure. That's all about how experts are only human too and can fail. And we brought forward a whole bunch of reforms which would have given Boris Johnson choices about what he did. And unfortunately, of course, that went nowhere in the midst of crisis, but it just illustrates that the ideas are out there to be grasped, to be implemented, to make sure that governments get what they want. And Nigel will actually have to do those things, and he'll have to prepare to do them well in advance. And it won't be any good doing them after they've got into power. Danny and others need to start now, preparing to very quickly change the structure of government so that it works for them.
Steve, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Steve Baker, check out his brilliant podcast, former Conservative government minister as well. Next up, Reform UK's Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 8:37 and breaking this morning, political history playing out before our very eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country as Reform UK inflict seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. The Uni-Party is dead, folks. No more left and right. Speaking just moments ago, the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has said now we can win the general election. Just to bring you up to speed, Reform are now on 380 seats. Extraordinary for a party that barely existed a couple of years ago. The Conservatives down 163, Labour down 256. They're expected to lose up to 87% of their councillors. The Lib Dems, I think broadly speaking, breaking even on plus 35, and the Greens slowly on the march, plus 27, although expected to pick up numbers when figures for London and elsewhere come in. Live in the studio, I'm delighted to welcome the organiser of CPAC UK, which is a right-wing political convention, and Reform UK supporter, Kane Blackwell. Good morning, Kane.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, and you've walked in with a very sunny disposition and a smile on your face, and many of my viewers and listeners are happy too, because they want change and they can see it coming.
Indeed, and the red wall has been well and truly smashed. The country said to Nigel Farage, Mr Farage, tear down this wall, and he's done it. and it's a fantastic moment for Reform UK. It's a fantastic moment for the country. You know, we've seen in Angela Rayner's patch absolutely reform of trounced Labour, in Andy Burnham's old patch absolutely smashed Labour across the country. My old boss in Havering, in Andrew Rosendale in Romford, they've just taken the council there. Absolutely fantastic news.
You took a tough decision to defect from the Conservatives around a year and a half ago. Do you feel vindicated now?
Well, I do, but it's not about being vindicated or not. This is about the country. You
didn't want to leave, did you?
Well, what I would say is this: the Conservative Party has left many people. I wanted to leave, of course, because I believe in Nigel Farage, I believe in the Reform Project, I believe in reforming this country. So yes, I did want to leave the party, but you know,
but it didn't happen immediately, did it?
No, it didn't.
You know, there was a certain point. You know, are the Tories going to wake up and understand that they've taken the wrong direction?
Yeah.
I think you communicated that internally. You were tearing your hair out for a long time.
For a very long time. I think many people have the same journey as myself, so you know, it is what it is, but you know, we now need to move on, and now Reform UK is the party that is actually the party of the country.
Potentially the performance might be even better than anticipated by Reform UK, that this could be truly seismic today.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a real shift. Politically in the country, there's a huge mood swing. I mean, I was speaking to my family who are up north in Lancashire, where there's elections, and people who have never voted don't go out and vote. They say, I'm going out and voting for Reform UK because I believe in Nigel Farage, I believe in the project, and I want to change. I want to get Labour out, I want to get Starmer out, and voting Reform UK has proven that's the best way to do it.
And clearly Labour will try to paint a picture that this is a bloody nose, that the people are making a protest vote. This doesn't look like a protest vote to me.
This isn't a protest vote. This is a seismic shift. This is Reform UK replacing the Conservative Party on the right of politics. This is a seismic shift. This is a change in our country. Reform UK is here to stay. We are not a protest party. We are the party of the right. We are the party of Britain. And that's how it's going to be from now on.
I'll be asking Robert Jenrick in just a moment, but how can your party hope to deliver at a local level, given the fact that most local authorities are borderline bankrupt?
Well, actually, in Kent County Council, where I live, the Reform UK have been doing some great work in trying to reduce the waste, getting rid of the mad net zero pledges, getting rid of, you know, going out of the Kent County Council building, going for a new regeneration scheme, which cost millions and millions of pounds. Scrapped that. All of these vanity projects that, to be fair, Conservative councils have been putting in place, we are now stopping.
OK, bear with me, because now we go over to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage.
Morning, everybody. I am delighted to be here in the sunshine outside Havering Town Hall, which I can now say is under new management. And I'm absolutely... And it's significant. It's our first win of a borough in London.
We've just lost the feed there to Nigel Farage. Oh, he's back.
Their most traditional areas. And what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex. So London goes a bit against the trend in that the Conservatives and Labour have held up in some of the other boroughs. But I think overall what's happened is a truly historic shift in British politics. We've been so used to thinking about politics in terms of left and right, and yet what Reform are able to do is to win in areas that have always been Conservative, but equally we're proving in a big way we can win in areas that Labour have dominated, frankly, since the end of World War I. At the moment, we're winning 1 in 3 of all the seats that are up, but I genuinely think the best is yet to come. I'm very excited about the North East results, the Yorkshire results, some more to come in the West Midlands. Essex, we're feeling supremely confident, and that's significant given that half the Cheddar Cabinet have seats in Essex. So it's a big, big day. It's a big, big day, not just for our party, but for a complete reshaping of British politics in every way. And it all goes to show that over the course of the last 2 years, through in the general election,
One or two issues there with the line to Nigel Farage, but clearly the Reform UK leader very happy about these results.
In the counting process so far, there's a lot still to come.
Yes.
You've clearly made a lot of gains. You're clearly doing very well. How well do you think you will do by the end of the day?
The best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. I'm very excited about the prospects for us in Sunderland, in Barnsley, in Calderdale, in Wakefield, Cannock Chase, areas like that. And by the way, you know, we took Newcastle under Lyme from the Conservatives, but there are going to be some big Labour wins. And perhaps in historic terms, Wales is the biggest of all. You know, Labour have not lost an election in Wales since 1922. I couldn't tell you whether Plaid will be first or we're going to be first, but what I can tell you is it's going to be a tight race between the two. So Wales, historically significant.
Nigel, live on Good Morning Britain. A lot of sentiment there. What about specifics, though? What do you actually need to do for communities, councils up and down the country?
Well, we've got a track record now. You know, where we have majority control of the 10 councils we won on May the 1st last year, 1 year in, you know, we can say hand on heart we've already saved over £300 million, and we've kept our council tax rises lower than any of the other parties running comparable counties. And if you doubt me, the IFS actually yesterday backed that up. So we are delivering value for money. What we're going to do here is, whilst many of these are new to politics, we've also got some old lags. Sorry,
Thanks,
Keith.
Val, yeah.
Well, you were the council leader, you know. So we've also got some experience of how to run this place, and we're very excited about the prospects. By the way, we all know that finances of local councils all over the country are severely stretched, and we're not promising miracles, but we are promising good value for
Do you
money.
recognise that this might be a protest vote, though, against Labour and Keir Starmer, and that's why people are coming to Reform when it comes to the general election?
Well,
results might look very different.
Well, have a look at last year. You know, last year we far exceeded expectations in the counties that were thought. You know, it can't continue to be a fluke or a protest vote. I would honestly say you're witnessing an historic shift in British politics. This is now the most national of all parties. We're competitive in the north of Scotland. We were competitive in Cornwall, in the county of...
Now we're just in and out of the line. This is Nigel Farage speaking in Havering.
For local councils, you've had some difficult questions about your own funding. £5 million.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that any other time you like. Go on.
Nigel, we've heard you claim before that the old two-party system is dead. What makes this time different to these results that you're heading for number 10?
Now, of course, that was Nigel Farage, who has said, and I quote, the best is yet to come when it comes to Reform and their potential electoral performance. Kane Blackwell, organiser of CPAC UK, which is a Conservative conference that's happening very shortly, which is a very exciting event. I'll give details of that shortly. Your reaction to what Nigel Farage has just had to say?
Well, I think he's completely right, and the best is yet to come. And Nigel's right in the sense when he says we have a track record of councils as well. Places like Kent, where I'm from, we have seen great strides forward in trying to reduce the debt, in trying to lower taxes and actually get better value for money for people. The Conservatives used to say that Conservatives' councils were the best run. Well, in Kent, we've seen that the debt was absolutely massive. Vanity projects were going everywhere. And now the grown-ups, I would say, are now in charge.
Now, Robert Jenrick is waiting in the wings. He's, of course, Reform's Shadow Chancellor. Kane, tell me about CPAC UK. It's massive.
It is. It's a huge event. CPAC GB is going to be huge.
Because it's one of the biggest political events in America.
It is. And across the entire world, actually, you've got CPACs in Japan, in Hungary, in South Korea, lots of different CPACs. And now we're going to have the first one in the UK, bringing together people from across the right of politics, from the Conservative right of politics to people who are free speech advocates like Lucy Connolly, who is speaking, Lord Toby Young, who is speaking as well. We're having people from the US administration like Rick Grenell, who is the President's Special Envoy. We are having people from across the world, from across the political spectrum, and it is going to be a huge event that is going to actually bring the right together, debate the ideas that are facing our country today and the Western world, and actually get together and sort out how we take back control.
CPAC Great Britain, how do people find out more about it?
Well, they can go to our website, which is www.cpac Great Britain /home. So if they type in CPAC GB into Google, they'll find it as well. They can buy tickets. Tickets are £100, which for a 2.5-day conference isn't bad, with some of the best speakers in the Conservative space.
There you go. CPAC Great Britain. Check it out. And please come back and see us again soon.
Thank you, Mark.
More power to you for this important event that's coming shortly. Folks, lots more to come, including the Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick. This is Talk Breakfast.
When conflict breaks out anywhere in the world, it has consequences here at home. Talk War is your definitive national security briefing. From the conflict in Ukraine to the tensions in Gaza and the latest escalation with Iran, this is where you'll find comprehensive comment and expert analysis with multiple updates throughout the day. The Talk War podcast from Talk, available on the Talk app or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:52 Talk Breakfast, and breaking this morning, political history is playing out before our very eyes as a turquoise tsunami washes across the country as Reform UK inflicts seismic damage on Labour and the Tories. Labour may well lose 87% of their councillors. For reaction, let's now speak to Reform's Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Congratulations on the results so far. Are they better than anticipated?
Yes, they are absolutely phenomenal. Look, we've hoped and hoped this would happen, but it is now before our eyes. This is, I think, a truly historic day where you're seeing a complete, comprehensive rejection of the old political parties. They both failed. The Tories promised secure borders and a strong economy. In fact, it was open season on the borders and a stagnating economy that left everyone feeling poorer. Labour came in promising change, and they were just more of the same. People want real change now in the country. They see that Britain is broken, and they want a strong leader to come in with the team to fix it and turn it around. And they are entrusting Nigel Farage and Reform with that task. Firstly, in their local town and city halls, and at the next general election with the country as well. So I think this is an incredible day where you're seeing political history being made before our eyes.
And Mr Jenrick, you are the Shadow Chancellor. Clearly, Reform UK are winning locally, but our local authorities are completely broke. The nation's finances are disastrous nationally and locally. Do Reform now need to manage expectations about just what is possible?
Yeah, look, the country is in a mess. We're the first to say, in fact, the only party to say that Britain is broken. And, you know, Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch astonishingly deny that. Does it mean that it's broken beyond repair? No. We can fix this and we can turn it around. But it's going to be tough and it's going to require difficult decisions. We've got to cut billions of pounds of waste that we see before our eyes, whether that's the billions being spent in foreign aid to rich countries or in benefits to people who aren't even British citizens, or on mad net zero subsidies that are just deindustrialising our country. And it will mean getting people who are shirking off benefits and back into work so that we have fairness for the millions of people, what we call Alarm Clock Britain, who are getting up, listening to your show this morning and going out to do a hard day's living to put food on the table for their family. We are their champion and we will cut out the waste so that we can bring down their bills, bring down their taxes and ensure that the public finances and the economy can be put back on a firm footing for the future.
Scrapping net zero, shrinking the welfare state, making it pay to work. These are all welcome policies that I think will be embraced by the majority of my viewers and listeners. Those are the levers that you'll be pulling if you become Chancellor. Will it be more difficult at a local level? Do you think you need to prepare my viewers and listeners for the fact that even if reforms sweep the board locally today, that taxes may still go up?
Well, you can look at the record of reform councils now in their first year in office, and clearly millions of people across the country have done that and said we want a piece of that because these councils are being well run, waste is being rooted out, and yes, council tax is going up, but it's going up less than if they were being run by the Tories or Labour. In some cases very significantly. And so the good people that were getting into these councils, many of whom have never been involved in politics before, just common sense people from their local area, are making real change come about. But will it be tough? Yes, because some of these councils have been incredibly badly run. They've been appallingly mismanaged. Some are actually on the verge of bankruptcy. And so it will be hard yards for reform in the years ahead, but you can see already in the councils that we do run that we're taking action, often on the simple things that people care about, like filling in the potholes in the roads in places like Nottinghamshire, where I represent. Those are things that matter. Reform councils will be focused on those, and we will demonstrate to the public that reform brings common sense, good value for money and better public services, and that will be a springboard to persuading people that we can run the country as well.
Now, financially, the country is already horribly in the red, Robert, as you well know. I fear on your behalf it will be in a worse state should you enter number 11. Are you prepared for that you're going to inherit an almighty mess, arguably a poisoned chalice?
Look, I think the country overall is in the worst state that it's been in my lifetime, probably worse than at any time since the 1970s. So we don't underestimate the challenges. That is why people are turning to reform and rejecting the Conservatives and the Labour Party, because they sense that the country is slipping away, that we are in decline, that we have been in decline.
And financially, it's actually worse than 2008 now, isn't it?
The public finances are in the worst state that they've been, taxes that are record highs. There are going to be tough choices ahead. As I said earlier, a lot of that is going to be about welfare reform. We've got to get the millions of people who are choosing not to be in work off benefits and back into the workplace. That means that we won't be giving out benefits for people with mild anxiety or very mild conditions, because it's not fair
ADHD, whatever
on
that
working people. It's not fair on working people. We've got to get those people off benefits and back into work. And that is how we ultimately will be able to bring down people's taxes and their bills in the years ahead. Reform is a party for working people. We've picked our side. We're on the side of working people, and we're going to do everything we can to lighten the load on those people.
If you become Chancellor, Robert Jenrick, you will inherit a broken economy. That's very clear. In a worse state than it currently is, I suspect. Therefore, is it going to be difficult to satisfy the needs of those disgruntled Labour voters that back reform, given that many are in work but still reliant on the state to keep the bills paid?
Look, the people who are coming to reform are working people who are working damn hard but not getting enough at the end of the day. You know, they're working all week and then find at the weekend that they still don't have enough to go out for a meal or to take their kids out somewhere nice, to even to go to the pub and enjoy a drink with their friends. That's not good enough. You know, that is not the country that we want to live in. Reform wants to build a country where people can feel better off at long last.
Well, you're right about that, but
mean...
those people don't want Thatcherism, do they? Even though it might be the right prescription for the country.
No, we're not a party of reheated Thatcherism. You know, we're going to tread our own path, which will mean doing some things differently. You know, we said, for example, that we want to ensure that we retain our strategic industries like steel and car manufacturing, glass and ceramics. I don't want to lose millions of good jobs, mainly in the towns and the cities of the Midlands and the North. That will mean, for example, a very different energy policy to the one we've had in recent times, an end to net zero madness and go for cheap and reliable energy so we can be competitive again as a country. We have the policy agenda. We are rearing to go. And we believe that if we apply this, as no government has done in the past, we'll be able to turn things around and we'll be able to bring back good jobs and make people better off again in this country.
Now, clearly, Robert, it's your view that the country lives beyond its means. Only a fool would disagree, or perhaps the Prime Minister. That means we would need a return to austerity, doesn't it? Are you comfortable with using that word as a prospective Chancellor?
No, because that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about rooting out tens of billions of pounds of waste. And it's there for us all to see.
Every government says that, don't they, though? They always talk about waste.
Yeah, but they don't have the backbone to tackle it. The things that Reform have already said that we would do amount to almost £50 billion of wasteful spending being cut. And in areas that the last Conservative government wasn't prepared to do. In fact, they doubled down on some of them. And this Labour government certainly isn't. Welfare reform, cutting aid to rich countries, not giving benefits to people who aren't even British citizens, getting rid of the net zero subsidies. These are things which only Reform has the conviction to actually get on and do. If we do those things, then we will save many billions of pounds, and we will then be able to ensure that we're investing in the public services that people rightly demand, like the NHS and education, and protecting the triple lock for pensioners. And we'll be able to, in time, bring down people's taxes.
Robert Jenrick, a delight to have you on the programme. Congratulations on an excellent set of results so far. My thanks to Robert Jenrick, who is Reform UK's Treasury spokesperson, Shadow Chancellor, if you like. Let's head over now to Sir James Cleverly, Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Good morning, Sir James.
Good morning, good morning.
Thank you so much for your valuable time. What are your thoughts so far about how the election results are panning out? It's still early days, but what's the mood music from your point of view?
Look, it's a mixed picture. There have been some disappointing results from a Conservative point of view. We have lost hard-working local councillors through no fault of their own, and that's obviously a massive disappointment. But we have held on to a number of councils that the pundits predicted that we would lose. I've just heard we've held on to Bexley Council, we've held on to Fareham Council in Suella Braverman's backyard, Harlow in Essex, Broxbourne. We've made gains here in Westminster and in Wandsworth. So it is a mixed picture, but the thing that comes over time and time again whilst I was campaigning is the fact that the British people really like Kemi. They like what she's saying, and they believe that she is a person of genuine integrity, and that is going to be a really important stepping stone for us to regain control of those councils and get back into government at the next general election.
Well, the point, Sir James, is that Kemi is fantastic. You're fantastic. There are other brilliant figures within the Conservative Party. The problem you have is some of those folks sat behind you, the dusty One Nation Tories, these centrist dads. who signed up for the unrealistic and economically crazy net zero target, the cult of welfarism, high immigration, and the COVID overreaction. That's the problem. It's not you or Kemi, it's those Tories sat behind you.
So you talk about Rob Jenrick, because he was supporting of all those things. I mean, he was the immigration minister when immigration peaked. He was the immigration minister that opened the asylum centre in my constituency.
He resigned in disgust.
He voted Remain. No, he resigned because I got the job that he wanted. Let's be honest about it. The fact is that Kemi is setting about putting the Conservatives back on the path to government. She set out a credible plan to cut tax. Rob Jenrick, Reform, Nigel Farage are all over the place with regard to welfare spending. They want to cut it, they don't want to cut it, they do want to cut it, they don't know where they stand on this. They've been nowhere when it comes to the protection of our veterans from vexatious legal actions. They've been nowhere with regard to holding the Prime Minister to account for his appointment of Mandelson. They've been nowhere on preventing the government from giving away the Chagos Islands and the billions of pounds that would have gone with it. They've been talking the talk but not walking the walk, and that is the difference between them and the Conservative Party. That is why Kemi is popular, and that is going to be, as I say, the stepping stone to our future electoral success, both at local government level and at national government level.
And Sir James, many of my viewers and listeners admire Kemi Badenoch, but they can't forgive a party that shifted leftwards in government. Do you acknowledge that problem, and what's to say that wouldn't happen again?
Well, look, there are a couple of things that I have come back to me over and over again. The tax burden was far too high, and we recognise that. COVID had a significant part to play because we had to spend a huge amount of money for COVID. I mean, you say it was an overreaction. It's easy to say that in hindsight, but at the time we didn't really know what we were dealing with. But we've got a plan, a credible, deliverable plan to cut taxes. She has made it clear that we're going to leave the ECHR so we can take proper control of our borders, so that we can once again get control of our laws from quangos. So she's setting out a credible plan, and the Conservative Party is following her on that plan. There are no dissenting voices in the Conservative Party because we recognise we got things wrong, and we recognise that. We will own that. And we are setting about repairing what went wrong. Kemi's at the forefront of that process, which is why I am absolutely confident that, as difficult as tonight or last night was, we are very much on the road to recovery.
Now, Sir James, in my view, the Conservatives have done far more good in office than negative, and they're the most successful political movement, I believe, in the history of Western democracy. How can you win back support from those disgruntled Conservatives who are flocking to Nigel Farage? How's it going to be done?
Well, look, Nigel is a fantastic political communicator. Fantastic political communicator. But he is making promises that he knows cannot be delivered. Let's just take Havering, for example. He's done a press conference over in Havering. I am pretty confident that he persuaded Andrew Rosingdale to defect on a promise that he would take Havering out of London and into Essex. At the press conference this morning, he is already starting to row back on that commitment. He's already U-turning because he says things to get elected and then he fails to deliver where he does. We've seen this in Kent, we've seen this in Worcestershire, where there was a promise that they would cut council tax and they increased council tax by 9%, the largest tax increase in the whole country under Reform-led council. In Leicestershire, they did a cost-saving analysis and they managed to find £1 million worth of cost savings. The process cost them 1.4 million. And where they have been elected, people see that they failed to deliver on their promises. Kemi has made it completely clear we will not promise anything that we cannot deliver. Now, in the short term, that may mean that Nigel Farage and Reform can say impressive sounding things. But the British voters are not fools, and they recognise when they've been played. And that is increasingly what they're seeing from Nigel Farage and Reform, and also, frankly, from Labour, from the Lib Dems, from the Greens. There is only one party that has a leader with true integrity and a real plan and a credible route to get the economy working and get this country back on track, and that's Kemi.
And Sir James, do you congratulate Reform UK on an impressive set of results?
Look, it's not. They are political opponents. I think they. I'll make the point.
Tongue-tied.
I think they've got these results. I think they've got these results on a false prospectus, and I'm not going to congratulate people for cheating to get a win. And I believe that's what they have done. If I am proven wrong through their good delivery, then and only then will I congratulate them. But in Kent, they've reneged on their promises. In Worcestershire, they've reneged on their promises. In Lincolnshire, in Leicestershire, they've reneged on their promises. And that is not something that should be congratulated.
Sir James, a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your valuable time. I look forward to our next on-air encounter. My thanks to Sir James Cleverly, Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Sir James has argued that Reform will not deliver should they win power nationally. They won't deliver locally, is his argument. Delighted now to welcome former Culture Secretary in a Conservative government, now a member of Reform UK, Nadine Dorries. Good morning, Nadine.
Good morning.
And you've got a smile on your face, understandably so.
I'm actually smiling, almost laughing at some of the things I've just heard James Cleverly say. You know, nothing he said was backed by any fact or any evidence. And I don't blame him. He's out there. I mean, someone throw the guy a shovel. He's out there desperately trying to claim some kind of ground of success for the Conservative Party last night. I mean, most of what he said was absolute hot air. That, you know, the Reform haven't delivered. No, we haven't delivered yet because we've not taken government yet. And when we will, we certainly will deliver. And the one thing I will say about Nigel Farage is there are no surprises in anything Nigel is saying. He's been saying the same things consistently for 30 years. And what James failed to mention was that, you know, Kemi, I served in government with, well, she wasn't in cabinet but at the time, but I served with Kemi. And what he failed to mention was that 3/4 of the Conservative MPs behind Kemi were all voted Remain and are all left of centre and all want to see closer ties with the EU. And they are silent on the promises that Kemi makes. They do not back her up. You don't see them running to TV studios to say, we support Kemi and we would vote for those things if we were in government. They don't. They're completely silent because the Conservative Party MPs do not support the policies which Kemi Badenoch talks about in order to win votes and to keep the...
For example, they don't. Many of those backbenchers, they don't want to leave the ECHR.
No, absolutely not. And I almost expected a revolt when, you know, listen to Kemi's words. What she says are, we are considering, we are thinking about, we are talking about. She never says, we will leave the ECHR. You know, she would never say that, because she knows that that would be the end of her time as leader in the Conservative Party. The MPs will tolerate a narrative which is a false promise, which says we're considering, we're thinking about, we're musing over, but they would never tolerate her saying, we will leave the ECHR. They just won't do that. She wouldn't have the support of her MPs. And James failed to mention that. And actually, James himself is one of those left of centre MPs in the Conservative Party. And the one thing I just say, again, if you don't mind, is that nothing James said was evidence-backed. I'll give you some evidence, and the evidence is in the numbers that people voted in last night to support Reform. They know the reason why people like me, lifelong Conservatives, left the Conservative Party to join Reform was because we were disgusted with the lack of delivery from the Conservative Party. We were appalled at the fact that the party had been taken over by MPs who'd been elected under a Conservative banner, who support policies which are simply not Conservative in principle in any way whatsoever. The Conservative Party is dead, it's lost, it's gone. the only party which actually supports right of centre views which are in tune with the vast majority of the British public is the Reform Party. That's why I'm there. That's why I've got a smile on my face this morning. That's why I'm delighted to see that the British people have decided to reject the two-party system and to support a leader who has consistently said the same things for 30 years and a leader who they know will deliver on his promises.
Now, it's my understanding, Nadine, that you defected from the Conservatives to Reform at the September conference of last year. You must feel vindicated, particularly this morning, watching these numbers roll in. At the moment, Reform are looking at 393 seats, which is an increase of 391, which is extraordinary and unprecedented. You're a big name and a big figure within politics. Might you anticipate a more prominent role within the party going forward?
Oh, God, I don't know. You know, I'm 69 in a few weeks. If the election's 3 years away, I'll be over the hill. I'm sure I'll be past it. So Are
you ruling out a run for the House of Commons at the next election?
Oh, I'm definitely not going to stand as an MP again. You know, I've stood for 9 elections, I think. I'm definitely not going to run again. It's, yeah, I've been there and done that 9 times in total in my life. I don't know. You know, I'm very happy just supporting Reform, helping out with certain policies, development of certain policies, being a spokesperson in terms of what I'm doing right now, commentating. I'm at a point in my life where I can stand back and I don't have to do what James has just done. I don't have to go on TV anymore and tell a story. I can just tell it as it is. And I really enjoy that. And it gives me a certain freedom, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. And, you know, I'll say again, just look at the numbers from last night. And, you know, I have been involved in successful Conservative governments. And I think that's because you know, I'm not blowing smoke at my own backside, but I think I'm pretty much in tune, coming from a working class background myself, with what voters want and what they need. You know, Keir Starmer has been out on television this morning saying that what people need is hope. Hope does not pay bills.
No.
Hope does not change your life in any way whatsoever. He's already saying the wrong thing, which will not resonate with those people who are going out and voting for Reform last night.
Most definitely. And are you concerned that if Reform win power at the next general election, or even perhaps locally in the next couple of years, that there's a risk they overpromise and underdeliver? For example, if in local areas the council tax goes up, or if when they get into power they don't stop the boats or they don't bring taxes down?
Well, let me tell you this. They will stop the boats, but taxes can't be brought down until the gross amount of spending on welfare bills and in other government departments is brought down. Taxes can't be dramatically reduced when the government spending bill is as it is at the moment. And that's why you hear Nigel and others in Reform consistently talk about reducing immigration. We don't have places in our schools. We don't have beds in our hospitals. Our welfare payments are sky high at record levels because of our high levels of immigration. People can't get on the housing ladder. People can't get homes in housing association or council homes because of our high levels of immigration. Immigration is at the root of many of our problems. And so the number one promise from Reform that you will hear people talk about consistently is stopping the boats, bringing down those levels of immigration, and even returning those people who are here illegally. And so that is the first nut which has to be cracked. Then we can start, and this is just, this is not official Reform policy, this is just me speaking as a Reform supporter. Then you can start looking at, okay, we can reduce government spending, but we need to bring down the welfare bill. And when we've done that, then we can start looking at introducing tax cuts. And I think the tax cuts that will probably be looked at initially will be those that will encourage investment into the UK, those that will contribute to growing the economy and supporting the country in terms of investment and growth. And that will be a plan for growth that every other government has promised but failed to deliver, because they know the first step in delivering growth and promising growth is controlling immigration. Labour talked the growth talk, but they couldn't talk the immigration talk because that's not in tune with either Labour MPs or Labour Party supporters. And when you hear Nigel and you hear Zia and Richard and others talking about immigration and controlling immigration, that is the first step in delivering growth and tax cuts.
Nadine, it's no doubt, looking at the numbers today, that you will anticipate Nigel Farage becoming Prime Minister in 2 to 3 years' time. Could his designs on number 10 be thwarted by tactical voting and a left-wing rainbow coalition? How much of a concern is that?
Well, of course it's a concern, and but I don't think British voters are that stupid. I mean, they're not stupid at all. They're very smart. Now, you will have people who are political activists. I heard somebody on the television this morning saying that they voted tactically for Lib Dems. And you will get people who are political geeks, very ardent political supporters of a political party who are non-thinkers. They don't think it through. And you might get that to some small, but most people's percentage, but most people just aren't that in that way motivated. They actually don't, their first love isn't a political party.
Yeah.
Their first love is their community and their family. And what they want to see is improvement in their communities, and they want to see a better life for their family. And therefore, I think what you're seeing last night is the number of people who understand the message to get this Labour government out and to get Starmer out. The only way to do it is to vote for Nigel Farage and to vote for reform. And people have heard that and they understand that. And I'm very sure, very hopeful that there are more people who want that as an outcome from a general election than want to do what's best for any political ideology or party. And I don't think when it comes to it, they'll go into the voting booth and say, I love the Liberal Democrats, therefore I'm going to vote for them just to keep the Liberal Democrats in power. I think they'll go into the voting booth thinking, and therefore I'm going to vote for someone else to keep reform out. I think they'll go into the voting booth thinking, I don't want hope. I want to pay the bills. I want my energy bills to come down. I want, jobs for my kids and my family. And I want a better community to live in. I want safer streets. I want places in schools. I want a better NHS. That's what people will think. And in order to deliver that, if that's what people want, if that is their hope for the future, there is only one way they can get that, and that is to vote reform.
Nadine Dorries, thank you so much for joining us on Talk Breakfast. Brilliant to have that conversation. Nadine Dorries there, former Culture Secretary, now a supporter of Reform UK. Sir Keir Starmer has broken his silence following these devastating local election results, which may be worse for Labour than even anticipated. We're looking at potentially a loss of 87% of their councillors. You heard me right. Do not adjust your TV. Don't adjust your radio. The Prime Minister has said the results overnight hurt and are very tough. Tough days like this don't weaken my resolve, he says, to deliver the change that he promised. So, is Starmer here to stay? Can he turf it out? Should he stay or should he go? 9:22. This is Talk Breakfast.
podcasts.
Is Starmer fueling anti-Semitism?
I don't think he's doing anything to deal with anti-Semitism.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up, Talk's international editor Isabel Oakeshott. First of all, a voice note from Penny on these seismic results, which have seen a turquoise tsunami wash across the country. Reform on the march. Here's Penny.
Morning, guys. It's good to hear Reform are doing well. However, if they do get in at a general election level, you have to remember what Theresa May said the other week, that it's not their policies that they're not trying to put through. It's the public services who are turning around and going, no, I'm not writing that law. So whoever it is that does get in at the next general election needs to have a long, hard look at that Tony Blair policy that he put in, saying that whoever it is in the offices can do whatever the heck they want and not listen to the elected officials, because that's where everything seems to be stumbling. Everything. For everyone.
Penny, you're absolutely right about that. Even the Conservatives could offer a defence that it was the left-wing progressive woke blob that thwarted their agenda. Penny, a very considered voice note. You sound busy, you're in the car. This is Alarm Clock Britain, this is Talk Breakfast. Isabel Oakeshott in just a moment, but first, the founder of Delta Poll, Joe Twyman. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Mark.
Are these results better than Reform might have anticipated?
It's difficult to say. I imagine that they had very high expectations, and so far those appear to have been met, even if they haven't actually picked up that many individual councils. It's worth saying, though, that it is early days, gone are the good old days when we used to count all these things overnight, and so really the true picture will only emerge over the next few days. But certainly picking up areas like Havering were top of their list of hopes. Newcastle under Lyme in the north of England, similarly, they've won the council there. And so that's definitely in line with their expectations. And crucially, it shows that a strong performance in the polls, at least so far, appears to be replicated in the ballot box.
Armageddon for Labour, we know that, Joe. How are things looking for the Conservatives at this early stage?
Well, I would say that for the Conservatives, yes, it's a bad picture and they are likely to lose many, many seats. But at the same time, they can point to things, as of course is often the way with local elections, they can point to things like winning Westminster, winning in Harlow, that perhaps were not as straightforward and expected as they might have been in other times. And so, yes, it's bad news for them. But with Labour, although they are obviously doing extremely badly, the early indications are that perhaps they're not quite doing as badly as was expected. And so what that means for the future of, for instance, Keir Starmer's leadership or the direction of the party is an interesting question as well.
Most definitely. Would you say the Lib Dems are likely to tread water this time round?
It looks like the Lib Dems are probably going to make net gains, and that will be the 8th set of local elections in a row that the Lib Dems have made net gains, and that is unprecedented in itself in British politics. But what they don't seem to be making is the kind of headline breakthroughs and the big increases that certainly Reform have made so far. Although it's worth pointing out that many of the areas that have declared so far tend to be more sort of demographically Reform leaning than the Greens, for instance, who will probably pick up more as time moves on during the day.
Well, that's right. All eyes on some of those big metropolitan areas for the performance of the Greens and their leader, Zach Polansky.
Yes, that's right. And so Zach Polansky and the Greens generally have been the success story in the polls over the last few months. But the key question for them has always been, can they overcome their relative inexperience, can they overcome the electoral system to really make noticeable gains in terms of both seats and councils overall? They tend to be more popular in areas with younger voters, particularly university towns and cities. And so, how will that play out in the hours and days to come? Will they be able to, for instance, pick up successes in London councils, moving things to either no overall control or perhaps even winning the council outright? That remains to be seen, but we may well see a green surge in some areas in the same way that we have seen a reform surge up to this point.
Joe, I know you're up against it. We'll let you go in just a second, and you're going to hate this question. I want to apologise now for asking you and for triggering you, but if there were a general election in 7 days' time, do Reform have enough to form an overall majority in the House of Commons?
I think it's unlikely. They seem to be picking up votes in areas that voted leave during the Brexit referendum, but they don't seem to be making anything like those kind of gains in the areas that voted remain or lean towards remain. And so there's no doubt that it's a strong performance, but is it big enough to win the kind of numbers that they would need for a majority? That remains very uncertain. But a week is a long time in politics. There are 170 weeks or so until the general election has to be held, and so it's perfectly possible that things could change. They could change for better for Reform, or they could change for worse. If the last 10 years of British politics have taught us anything, it's that nothing can be guaranteed. At the same time, nothing can be ruled out.
Joe, we know you have a busy day ahead. Thank you for joining us. Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll. Talk's international editor is Isabel Oakeshott. And Isabel, has Joe deflated you slightly there with a suggestion that perhaps Reform won't have the numbers to form a majority at the next election?
Well, I think Reform would be delighted to have the opportunity to prove that wrong tomorrow. If a general election were called. Unfortunately, it's vanishingly unlikely that there will be a general election called anytime soon. You know, it's something that I think people up and down the country debate endlessly. When are we going to have a chance to actually get rid of this horrendous government? And there are very limited circumstances in which that might happen sooner rather than later. I don't think there's much point in talking about how the numbers might fall in a general election that's likely to be probably nearer 3 years away at this point. We're still quite early days on the results coming in, but they do look very, very exciting for Reform, picking up many seats already. I've just seen a projection from a credible polling company that Reform will win over 1,500 seats, with Labour losing roughly the same amount. Massive amount of work has gone into this on the Reform side for the last few months. It's quite a contracted period in which what is still a very new party by all comparisons is having to play a very, very strong and organised ground game. You know, thousands of candidates, you know, huge scale of trying to filter those through, trying to weed out any bad uns, and there's always going to be bad uns for any party when you've got such a large number of people standing. And I think it's very, very exciting. And I know it's hard for people to get excited about local government elections. I mean, I'm a political commentator, and even I struggle with, you know, sort of really getting worked up about the detail. But this is about a direction of travel. And if Reform can put on so many extra councillors and take control of more councils, then that really sets the framework for the party to win in the future.
Many of these councils, as you know, Isabel, are flat broke because of socialist policies. So do Reform UK need to manage expectations about what can be achieved in many of these areas? Out with their control, taxes will go up.
So I think that's a really good question. I think that's something where probably the party leadership would accept that the messaging on this could have been better. I think that there was an impression created, and it wasn't actually by the party leadership. When you look at what they said, they never said we will reduce taxes in Reform councils. What they said is that they would stop the rise being quite so meteoric, the wrong word to use, but stop such a sharp rise. But that's quite a nuanced thing, you know, to explain to people, you know, your taxes won't go up quite as much under us. And I think that perhaps there was an expectation created that reform would actually dramatically reduce taxes. And that is so difficult. You know, just to give you an example, the scale of children being defined as disabled, which is around 1 million across the country, just astonishing.
It's an insult. It's an insult to disabled people.
I mean, let's call this what it is. It is an absolute racket. It's a racket by parents. Of course, not all of them, let me be clear. There are many children who really do need help, but it is a racket by a number of parents, and a very significant number of parents.
Yeah.
And it's a racket by vested interests. Now, when I tried to write about this earlier this week, I found it very, very difficult to get that publicity, because the lobby that descends on any criticism of this use of taxpayers' money is so vocal and aggressive. And reform is going to have to take that lobby on, along with so many other lobbies, if it gets into government at a national level, but also at local level. And it is bitter, and it is bruising, and it is brutal to be in that fight. You are up against huge vested interests. It's just one example. And it's not easy. And a lot of our people that are coming in are pretty inexperienced. Their heart's in the right place. They passionately believe in saving our country, and they know what needs to be done. But it's going to take a lot to actually get on top of these spiraling waste and abuse of public money at a local government level.
Does it worry you that reform may be thwarted, should they win a general election, by the left-wing progressive blob?
I think it should worry all of us. I think, you know, if anyone can do it, it will be reform. And in particular, you know, Nigel Farage working with Zia Youssef on immigration. You know, Zia is rapidly emerging as our toughest, most radical shadow cabinet member on an issue that is so difficult and so sensitive and involves taking an awful lot of flack. And I think if anyone can push through reform's very, very dramatic policies of, frankly, mass deportation, it is Zia Youssef. But do I think that's going to be easy? No, I think it's going to be hell on earth making it happen. But make it happen we must, because, you know, there are a number of people that I talk to who say this is the last chance for the UK. You know, we are losing our country. Some of our listeners and viewers may have seen a clip from earlier today of the Green Party celebrating a local win. I'm not quite sure where it was, in which the entire commentary was in a foreign language. It was in Arabic. I mean, for goodness sake, this is the UK. And it is going before our very eyes.
I couldn't agree with you more. However, given Reform's strong performance today, and of course the numbers are still coming in, but it's looking like a turquoise tsunami, Isabel, there's bound to be more scrutiny of Reform, of their policy platform, and indeed of their prospective MPs or current MPs. We've had reports into the tax affairs of Richard Tice, your partner, and of course the £5 million donation to Nigel Farage before the election. How many more skeletons do you think are in the Reform closet, and is it going to be a problem? Could sleaze thwart Nigel Farage's ambitions?
Absolutely not. And I think what we'll see today will be a wholesale voter rejection of these increasingly desperate smear campaigns. You know, we've had everything thrown at us in recent weeks. I say us because, as you mentioned, my partner Richard Tice, who found himself on the front page of the Sunday Times, almost got a debenture slot with unbelievably convoluted and crashingly boring claims about sort of Byzantine errors of filing on his tax. He said that he will correct anything that was wrong. Nigel Farage's £5 million gift for his security has been well raked over. Let's see what voters make of that. If Reform comes out today with a whole load of extra council seats, that will be the electorate saying, do you know what, we don't actually care about the private finances of the party leader, of the party's deputy leader, of all the other key people in the party. What we care about are these people going to save our country? Do they have what it takes? Do they have the skill set? And let's see if today proves an endorsement that they do, that people think they do actually have those qualities.
Thanks, Isabel. Isabel Oakeshott is Talk's international editor. Here's a voice note from Big Lee.
Morning, young man. Lee in his van from Scarborough, feeling very chipper this morning. Well done, Nigel. Now then, Mr. Starmer, if this isn't a wake-up call for you to get out of number 10, I don't know what is. But you'll cling, you'll hang on with the rest of them. So my advice to you, fella, will be to get out now. But brilliant. Well done, Nigel. Great show, lads. Keep it up.
Are you happy about Reform's performance? I'm going to try to take a call or two before 10 a.m. 0344 499 1000. And can this be replicated at a general election? And Starmer, should he stay or should he go? One of the biggest names in journalism joins me next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Simon in Skelmersdale, beautiful part of the world, Skelmersdale. Simon says, hi Mark, I can't believe there are still people voting for the Tories after their 14 years of betrayal. Brian says, my God, James Cleverly, your guest, is in total denial of what's happening across the country. He continues to spout the BS that got the Tories booted out of government 20 months ago. Here's a voice note from Wayne.
Morning, Mark. It's Wayne from Erdington in Birmingham. Go Reform. It's the first time since Starmer's been destroying this country I've had a smile on my face. Let's get this treacherous, traitorous little man out the country. He's drove us off the edge of a cliff. Weedy little man. Oh, keep up the good work, Mark. I'm a happy man today.
Thank you, Wayne. This from, let's have a look. It is John in Poole. On the election results, Mark, I wonder who Starmer will throw under the bus this time. Maybe Donald Trump. Great show as always. Thank you for that. Look, it's very clear, isn't it, that the Prime Minister has a mandate to run the country. He, of course, had the landslide victory in 2024. He will argue that he's inherited an enormous mess
from the Conservatives: broken public services, a broken economy, a broken society. He will argue that him and his government are working very hard to improve the lives of ordinary working people and to tackle the cost of living crisis. He will also argue that he avoided participation in the Iraq war, which he considers to have been a hot mess. And let's not forget, a good number of people did vote Labour. He's broken his silence. He said the results overnight hurt and are very tough. Tough days like this don't weaken my resolve to deliver the change that I promised. They strengthen my resolve to do so. Tarquin is in the capital. Hello, Tarquin.
Mark, how are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. We've been so busy, barely time for calls this morning. Very glad to get you on. Your reaction to what's happening?
Yeah, so Mark, I don't know whether or not you've had it in the time that since your show began when the results were coming in. I just wanted to throw this into the mix, if I may. I think it might be a little bit, I don't know what your take is on this, Mark, a little bit early for Nigel to be measuring up the curtains at number 10 just yet, because, and this is my kind of argument, my hypothesis, is the Rupert Lowe factor, the whole Restore Britain thing, of which there's, what is that, about 125,000 signed-up members. Whether or not they stayed home yesterday or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just think that the danger would be, if you pan it out, you look between now and 2029, 3 years in which things can happen. Let's say, for example, and God forbid this happens, but I fear it may, is that the right-wing vote, you know, the Conservative with a small c patriot vote, gets split down the middle between Nigel and Rupert Lowe and maybe others, and lets the bloody left back in.
What would you say, Tarquin? What would you say to Rupert Lowe supporters? What would you say to them in the event of a general election?
Well, if the scenario is if Rupert manages to get his grassroots system into place, like Nigel and Richard Tice have in the next 3 years, then there's literally a choice for somebody to make. Do they want mass remigration, or do they want sort of, you know, the Nigel Farage slightly softened version, but still better than what we've got, which is complete Fabian nihilism? Nothing. You know, we just got destruction. I mean, England and Britain won't even exist by 2030. We know this.
I agree with that.
So we're at 5 minutes to midnight. We're in the danger zone, people. It's really serious times. If we don't manage this correctly, I mean, we can be all happy and vainglorious today, but next week, when whether or not Starmer goes or not, it's kind of irrelevant, isn't it? Because whether or not Rayner comes back or the, you know, the King of the North burner, it doesn't really matter, because they're all Fabian lunatics. They're going to destroy us. So it doesn't matter who's at the head of that globalist thing. So what do? Do we try and create some sort of concord between Advance UK, all of them? We'll list them all. We know who they are, because we need to somehow do this for our children and our grandchildren, if we are even to have anything other than an Islamic State in 50 years, because that's the way it's going. I mean, you rightly or wrongly, it's not going to be these
demographic changes. Yeah. Well,
So
Tarquin, then briefly, just yes or no, is Farage the compromise that those on the right must accept?
I wouldn't even say Nigel's is corrupt, because I think it's wonderful that he came back. I think he's very much came out of the legacy of the Brexit Party. But yes, of course, it's got to be better than crazy Fabian Starmer. God, yes.
Tarquin, call me again soon. Enjoyed your company this morning. Brilliant call. Lots of people like Rupert Lowe, but do the right wind up dividing themselves. Lots of admirers for Ben Habib out there as well. Let's speak to one of the most respected journalists in the country, the senior political commentator at The Telegraph, Annabel Denham. Hello, Annabel.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for the introduction.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. The question on the tip of many people's lips will be, can this success that Reform is seeing locally be replicated in the event of a general election?
Well, look, I mean, we have to bear in mind that our first past the post electoral system is designed to keep out insurgent parties such as Reform, or indeed the Greens. It is very difficult for them to punch through. Nevertheless, they have topped around 275 consecutive polls. You know, they were at over 30%. Now they've slightly dipped beneath that. But I suspect that these election results today will give them the renewed momentum that they have been clamouring for just in recent months. So, you know, 3 years is a long time away, Mark. So let's see. But certainly it has been a very good night for Reform, a very good night for Nigel Farage, and a disastrous one for the Labour Party, who have really seen Farage eating their breakfast, lunch and dinner.
Most definitely. Well put. Well, we now have a post on X from the Prime Minister, and it reads as follows. These are tough results for Labour. There's no sugarcoating it. We've lost brilliant Labour representatives who have stood up for their communities. People are still frustrated. Their lives are not changing fast enough. We haven't offered enough hope or optimism for the future. I was elected to change this country. Tough days like this don't weaken my determination to do that. They strengthen it. This sounds, Annabelle, like a prime minister that isn't going anywhere.
No, I think Starmer's made very clear in recent weeks and months that it's his intention to cling on, even if it's by his fingernails. He will lean into the idea that he feels a duty to this country. He will lean heavily on the fact that he was given that very strong mandate back in July 2024. He won 411 seats in that general election. You know, he's one of few Labour leaders to actually win a general election over the last century. And there are still some Labour MPs, backbench Labour MPs, particularly those of the 2024 intake, who remain loyal to him for that. They believe that without Keir Starmer at the helm, they wouldn't have been successful in 2024. Nevertheless, there's been serious souring of relations between Keir Starmer and the Parliamentary Labour Party over the last couple of years, really, ever since he entered number 10. And he doesn't have that many people who are willing to go out and bat for him. You know, how many cabinet ministers will we be seeing on the broadcast rounds today going out and making those arguments that we're now familiar with, that they've only been in power for 2 years, they've got to unpick all of the problems that the Tories left behind after 14 years of chaos and mismanagement, and they'll lean as well into the Iran war, into the Ukraine war, these black swan events that are simply out of their control, and of course the bogeyman with which we're all familiar, Brexit, and Keir Starmer pinning his hopes on the idea that some sort of reset with the European Union, dragging us back into its gravitational orbit, will lead to an improvement in his own personal electoral fortune. So let's see. But despite the remarks from Lucy Powell, the Deputy Labour leader, last night, forewarning us that it was going to be a bruising day for Labour, despite the fact that some wings of the Parliamentary Labour Party are feeling pretty mutinous, at the moment it does look like the Prime Minister is going to cling on and will do so for as long as he possibly can.
Annabelle, I think you'll agree that Kemi Badenoch's performance as leader of the opposition has improved, notwithstanding the expected disappointing results at the local elections, which are coming through as we speak. That said, you've got a resurgent Reform UK. What's going to happen to the political right in the weeks and months ahead?
Well, there's been some seeming inconsistency in some of the noises that we've heard from both camps over the last few days. There's been that intimation that Tory councillors would be willing to work with a minority reform local authority if that's what was required. But Kemi Badenoch then categorically ruled that out. Nigel Farage, about a week ago, said it's too early to be having conversations about pacts and agreements and coalitions, but again, didn't seem to unequivocally rule out the potential, the possibility that the two parties at some point could come together, could work together. But again, we then saw a toughening of rhetoric just on the eve of the local of these elections from Reform. They were insistent, the spokespeople that I spoke to there, that the Tories would toast, that today would be the evidence of that, and there's no need for them to even consider countenance some sort of working arrangement. So you know, it really is just too early to say. We don't know how many seats Reform and indeed the Tories will win at a general election 3 years from now. So we just don't know whether they will eventually feel as though it is in their own best interest, but also the national interest, to come together in order to stop some ghastly rainbow coalition of Lab, Lib, Green, SNP, Plaid, possibly some independents thrown in for good measure. So let's see. But I think, you know, after today, the feeling in the Reform camp will very much be that they don't need to work with the Conservative Party because they are the dominant force on the right of British politics, and they will win the next general election.
We have a tweet, a post on X from Diane Abbott, of course, Labour MP, ex-Labour MP. Has she lost the whip? I think she got it back. So let's have a listen to what she's had to say. She said, there's no denying that these election results are going to be very bad for Labour. Yes, Keir Starmer is very unpopular, but it's the policies that drive that unpopularity. Simply changing the leader without changing the policies will not avert disaster in 2029. I'm really worried about this, Annabelle, because I think that if Starmer is replaced, then the new Prime Minister will be more left-wing. It'll be either Ed Miliband, who doubles down on net zero, or Angela Rayner, who will be backed by the unions, who will expect their pound of flesh should she enter number 10. And even Starmer himself, if he remains, is going to face unprecedented pressure from those backbenchers to shift leftwards. So notwithstanding who wins the next election, we're in for a bumpy couple of years, aren't we?
I put this to Kemi Badenoch a couple of months ago, actually, when I was interviewing her, whilst she was commendably holding Keir Starmer's feet to the fire over the Peter Mandelson scandal. And I said, you know, for all of the demands that the Prime Minister go, are we considering that what comes next will surely inevitably be worse? And you've laid it out there, Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham, all figures who are to the left of Keir Starmer. And there's a danger that even if that's the threat, then Keir Starmer will lurch to the left. And we have seen some subtle hints of this with Rachel Reeves, for instance, just a couple of weeks ago saying that she would consider bringing in rent controls. That is a Green Party policy. So I think whatever happens, we should brace for Labour to attempt to neutralise the Green Party, the Green threat, by moving leftwards. But, you know, actually, it's interesting because if you look at the results that we have thus far, the greater danger, arguably, to Labour has been reform. It is reform that is winning in former Labour heartlands. And therefore, you know, was Morgan McSweeney right all along when he said that that ought to be their focus rather than what's going on the left flank?
Annabelle, I look forward to reading your coverage in The Telegraph. Annabelle Denham is the senior political commentator at The Daily Telegraph. More to come. This is Talk.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, you know, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Folks, thank you so much for your interaction today. It's been a very busy show, an election special, and the headlines are very clear. A turquoise tsunami washes across the country. I'll bring more reaction on Talk Breakfast tomorrow and Sunday with the biggest names in broadcasting and journalism. Speaking of which, Live in the studio in 2 minutes' time, the one and only Alex Phillips. How, Alex?
Hello.
A lot of my viewers and listeners are very